What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Season Gaming Bitcast, episode 248. It is your weekly show covering the biggest topics in gaming with industry, technical, and legal insight. I am your host, Ainsley Bowden, joined by these two fine gentlemen you see before you today. First, on my right, gaming dyno in hand, the man, the myth, the legend, the stroke recovery master, Mr. Hoeg himself. Good morning.
I do my best, Ames. It's an interesting one. I like that. Good morning, everybody. Yeah.
You've been mastering the recovery of a stroke.
I feel like if to be a stroke recovery master, you would have to have recovered from several strokes at the very least. You know what I mean? Like,
you shut your mouth, Travis. You shut your mouth.
He's still on his first. I'm just saying he's a journeyman at best.
Yeah.
I'm very hopeful to keep it at only.
He's ahead of the curve, though. I'd say he's ahead of the curve. I think. How you doing, man? You had a long stream yesterday. Big turnout. Lots of support. It was fantastic to see.
How you doing? Fun yesterday. I'm good. I'm waking up a little bit. Honestly, 6-hour stream, live stream, hitting all the buttons, knocked me out a little bit.
Sure.
But I wanted to see if I could do it, and we made it. So I'm very excited about that entire stream yesterday. If you didn't see, we raised money for 2 of my hospitals. One that held me in ICU and had my brain surgery, and one that had me in inpatient rehabilitation. And it went really, really well. We had my brain surgeon on the stream yesterday. We did a lot of fun stuff. And I think it was Travis's favorite part, talking with the brain surgeon, wasn't it? You could tell from his reactions that he really enjoyed
your brain jello. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. My surgeon came on and talked about going into my brain with a catheter, and Travis just really loved it. So you got to check out those clips from the stream. It's on replay on my channel from yesterday.
You ever feel like a loose bag of liquid? Because listening to a doctor talk about opening somebody's skull up in great detail will make you do that. At least for me, makes me feel like I'm about to fall apart at any moment.
I was right there with you. I get like tingly, like, oh, this is like creeping me out.
Yeah.
I'm months into people just talking to me about body function every single minute. So yes, I believe I was like that when it started, but now
even before his stroke. People just talking to him about body function.
I'm desensitized to all of the medical stuff.
See, he has become a master. He's getting there. Okay. Travis, good morning, man. What's happening?
McClunky, what's happening with me? I've got a review next week. And
I wasn't asking for, pure work details of what's going on.
I hung out with Tommy Wiseau on Friday night. You guys know Tommy Wiseau?
That is. No.
That's the guy that did the Room.
Correct. Yeah, he lives in San Francisco.
Okay.
He was played by James Franco in a movie. And he just debuted his latest movie, which also is a train wreck, called Big Shark. And I went to the debut, and I got him to sign some of my room swag, which everybody has, obviously, because that's a normal thing to do. It was fun. Good times.
Okay.
Fun guy.
You guys are just living in your own world out there, aren't you?
It's true. That is a fair assessment. We are a separatist nation state, San Francisco. It's fine.
Oh man. Good morning, chat. Good morning, everyone. Wow, already nearly at 200 concurrent viewers right out of the gate. That's awesome. Thank you. Couple notes real quick. We have the charity link to Ascension Hospital, the one Hoeg mentioned at the top of the SG stream. You can check that out there. As Hoeg mentioned several times yesterday, they also have specific merch where all the proceeds are going to the 2 hospitals as well until, I believe, tomorrow, Hoeg? Through tomorrow?
It's going to be tonight at some point, probably 4 p.m. Eastern, give or take.
Okay. All right. So you've got, while you're watching this, in a few hours to get any of that limited time merch and to continue supporting the cause. So also big shout out to, I believe, Vintage Willow, if I've got the name correct. Yes, Vintage Willow started the morning off for us here with 10 gifted memberships on both channels. Wow. Super generous. Thank you very much. Yes, that is fantastic. And honestly, I think that I'm not going to check while we're talking, of course, but I think that might have put us over 100 members on the SG side, which is just incredible. So you guys have been very generous with that. Thank you very much.
That is great. Well deserved, Danes.
Thank you, man. Thank you. You might notice Dan is not here. Dan is out traveling the country with his family today. So he's up in the Northeast visiting New York, Boston, and all kinds of areas. And according to our DMs, just enjoying the hell out of it.
He just loves it. Not just our DMs. He's been pretty public on Twitter.
This is true.
If I were his in-law, I feel like I would follow him on Twitter because that would be quite the experience.
What's funny is despite how public things like that are, Twitter or social media or elsewise, if your people aren't on it, you can basically just post on there like whatever you want. And so I think that's what Dan is relishing in right now is that nobody that actually knows him that he sees in real life is actually following him on Twitter. So
very true.
He can use it like it's a private chat.
That's right. That's why kids never want to be on the same social media platform as their parents. You know, it kind of ruins it if your dad can ground you in a comment.
Yeah. I won't
yes, but it's still forever, folks. It can still come around on you. So don't think that it actually is a private chat.
Very true. Very true. Charity stream, Dan, and then we got a comment last week, which I knew Travis would get a kick out of. So I saved it for this week. This was a comment on a Bitcast from last week on the SG side. It was from test subject 15. I hope he's doing okay. I don't know how the prior 14 went, but here's the actual comment. It's rather long, but I'll read this out. It relates to the frame rate conversation. And by the way, Travis, we got a number of comments relating to frame rate fascists, which I found hilarious. Nice. People are really kind of digging that and laughing about it. But I think this one will get you. So he or she said, I think having the option of playing in a quality or performance mode is a big problem this generation. Most normal gamers don't know the difference, let alone the definition of the two. And those that do use it as some sort of ultimately pointless, divisive wedge to start a war over, which is the true way to experience a game. I say let the developers decide how they want us to play it. Do they think a solid 30 FPS is the ideal way to experience their work? Then build the game on that mode and be done with it. Why let gamers, the most rabidly ignorant, indecisive, jumping the gun idiots, decide how the game should perform technically? It makes zero sense. And I was like, I think this might be Travis's alt account here posting this, but
that was not me. And I don't know if I agree 100%, but I definitely see that perspective. And I wouldn't argue against that person. I would be like, I see what you're saying there. I tend to believe that devs probably know more about how their game should be performing, but
I think options are better. I think I'm not. But I like it when developers give like their default recommendation. I feel the same way about difficulties as much of that comment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Which is like, I really like it when they describe one of them as the way the game's meant to be played. Like, this is what we were aimed at, is this mode, whatever we call it, whether it's hard or brutal or normal or easy or whatever they want to name it, as long as it has a description that says this is what we were trying to make. I think you could do the same with frame rate. I think the difficulty I have with performance and quality is that there actually isn't a kind of regulated definition of these things. So it's constantly a battle between, is your performance really kind of locked at 60, or is it like an aspirational performance mode? And what I really want is where you're locked somewhere, and quality is better for that. So I like a locked frame rate. I don't like a wishy-washy kind of fluid frame rate situation. So that matters a lot more to me than the higher number.
Yeah. I definitely see the perspective of liking player choice, but also I do believe that devs, if they have a way that they want the game to be experienced, that they should probably curate it. Just like they do with difficulty. I think that's a pretty good parallel, because some people really like having choice with difficulty, and some devs are like, nah, that ain't us. I do think there's a little bit of creep in the console space when it comes to choice that isn't that great. Like, if you log into Destiny, you'll see that there's like a bunch of sliders to change things like FOV, and people use that to gain like advantages in the game. You can see more on your screen by pulling the FOV back, and stuff like that has always struck me as a little weird. I get why people enjoy having the choice, but it ultimately makes the rich get richer and the poor get poorer when it comes to skill and multiplayer comp and that sort of stuff. And it's always just struck me as a little odd that you can choose how much of the screen you want to see, because you would think that that's something that's really
fundamental.
a design choice. Yeah, you know. So I think there's been a little bit of creep from the PC world to make things more complicated for console player. And I don't know,
that's an excellent point,
been
because
good.
I don't want a PC on my TV.
Exactly.
That's not what my console is for.
Yeah,
so
and that's
I don't
where the
touch any of those.
performance. Yeah, that's where the performance quality thing comes from, right? That's like a PC concept that sort of crept.
Well, I mean, I think
its
it's
way
a
on
consolification of a PC concept, right? I mean, they sort it to the two buttons, really, and it's like faster or not faster. And I think that was a good move, but I do think you still have to kind of go and like read reviews and technical analyses now to be like, oh, well, this performance mode doesn't actually get to 60, or, you know, evaluating what it is that the two modes actually do is not so easy. And I think they try to shorten it too much on those screens, where it's just like, well, you know, quality is slower. And like, here's a picture. If you look at the pictures for Jedi Survivor, by the way, the one that is highlighting performance mode is at like some resolution that looks like an adventure game from the 90s.
It looks like a 480p picture. Yes, it does.
And it's like, well, that's definitely not going to look like that. But are you trying to encourage me to not hit that button? I mean, like, what are you doing with that picture? Because it looks like old adventure games.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. There needs to be better descriptions. And part of the problem, which funny enough, we're definitely going to dive into today, is to your point, like Star Wars being the most recent example, where even in their goals that they were aspirational to hit for the two modes, they didn't hit them. Not at launch anyway, right? So that makes it even harder to decide. But I agree with you, Hoeg. They need to be a lot more descriptive around what they were aiming for if you're going to provide options, because just saying quality or performance assumes that a random player knows what you mean by that, and you can make some assumptions based on past experiences, but you don't know what they were shooting for really in that game. The FOV one's interesting, Travis. I'm a big proponent of being able to increase my FOV, but I understand your point of if the game's going to run at 100 FOV versus 80, then why didn't everyone run at 100 FOV?
Yeah, and it seems like a choice a developer should make for how they want their game to feel. Yeah, everybody turns it up to max always. There's never like, oh, you know, it's 92, like that's the setting. It's like every time it's an option, people slide it all the way up. Really? You don't go to 105 or whatever the max is?
No, I usually go to about 95 to 100 because I hate the fish bubble effect.
Yeah, there's definitely one that looks like a fish camera.
Yeah, I can't do that. So I go as wide as I can before it starts feeling like that.
On Destiny, it's like ubiquitous. Like people,
I think it's 110 on Destiny on console, right? Is the max?
I thought it was 105, but yeah, people tend to just slide it all the way up and leave it there. Like that's what I did, and I was like, oh yeah, I get why people play this way. It feels like you're moving quicker, and then that was sort of the end of that. Just a little weird.
No, I'm probably
Destiny's really well optimized.
I hate it when movies have cinematography that has the blurry edges on the sides. So I don't like any of that distortion.
Well, FOV is supposed to reduce the motion blur. I think that's why it's a setting.
It's not motion blur. It's
not motion blur, but
image.
Yeah, it's supposed to make you feel like you're moving quicker. The screen's more static. I don't really understand it. I think it's an excessive.
Yeah, and the problem still is optimization, because what they usually warn you of, right, is the greater FOV, the more your frame rate can be impacted depending on performance and the the hardware, and so
yeah.
These boxes under your TV can't take 190 degrees or whatever you tried to set it at there, Haas.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Right.
No.
And there's another example of why people toggling with these things manually doesn't feel right to me. If it's going to affect the performance of your game, and your mileage may vary based on the FOV settings you choose, it just seems a little odd that's you're
in PC land at that point.
You're exactly.
Fiddle with buttons, which is my least favorite thing about PC gaming. So.
Yep, me too, man. Me too. I'm building a new PC right now, and I'm really, really not looking forward to the headaches that will follow, because they always say it gets easier on PC, and it definitely has, but still without fail, every 3 to 6 months, I find myself beating my head against the wall for a couple hours trying to fix some damn thing on PC, and it's not an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, well, you're always
try to play
get a little more out of it. I'm currently playing Age of Wonders 4 and trying to get around some CPU bottlenecking, either in the code or my computer. It's always hard to tell. And then that will take 2 or 3 hours that I haven't invested yet. And so I haven't played this game that I'm really excited about playing. It's PC gaming.
Yep.
Yeah, I went to play Battlefield yesterday, and the EA app on PC was just failing for whatever reason. Wouldn't recognize my login, wouldn't open properly. the authentication was failing, and I spent like 30 minutes, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not playing Battlefield today. Like, so frustrating.
I actually have to reset my entire computer to factory settings about once every 6 months because I play games that aren't out yet. And a lot of times when they send you a game that isn't out yet, not only is it completely unoptimized, but you get it sent to you as an exe file, just like straight up. It's not through any platform or, you're not launching Steam. You literally just like launch a game from desktop. Feels very 1995. Like, you gotta, yeah. And so that
type in the line in the DOS code.
Yeah, it tends to destroy your computer really quickly. Stuff just happens to my PC, and I'm like, I don't know what happened, but I know that it needs a purge. It needs a start over. So.
Purge. Yeah. By the way, shout out to co-counsel who's in the chat. Good morning, Miss Hoeg.
Yep, she was there for the bulk of the stream yesterday as well.
Yeah.
She's been amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Biggest fan.
Awesome. That stream was definitely fun. Yes, I'm glad that Travis and I happened to be on at the time when when your brain surgeon came on. That was, despite grossing me and Travis out and probably others too, it was very interesting to hear his perspective. So, cool. Let me get these. We got a couple really quick super chat, super stickers I want to get to. Then we'll talk about what we're currently playing. So, Googleman is starting us off fresh with the €5 super chat. Always before the show starts, he said, "I finally bought Cult of the Lamb. Never thought shoveling your followers' poop while they eat grass could be such fun. Video games."
Poop, smiling. Llama and a settings cog. Or just
you
a
see
cog.
A settings cog? I see a Jewish star. I think that's
it's a Jewish star.
Oh my God, that is a Star of David.
The Jewish member of Bitcast didn't recognize the Jewish star. I
think he was going for a pentagram. It's very small on my screen. It just looks like a settings wheel. Yeah, I think he was going for a pentagram, given that it's Cult of the Lamb. But that is definitely Star of David.
Yes,
which
probably
is a very different symbol. That is also a good game.
It is very good.
It's a very good game. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Google. Appreciate you. Marianne Williams, I say this every week. It's like clockwork. How generous you are. $20 super sticker on both sides of the house, Season Gaming and Hoeg side. So I'm out of words to say superlatives other than just thank yous, lots of thank yous, and super appreciative. Thank you very much. Mr. Orange says $4.99 super chat. I'm here for Hoeg, just supporting my guy.
Thank you, Mr. Orange.
Hell yeah.
That's awesome. And Gecko Gamer, our regular friend over here with the €11 super chat. Hi, Bitcast. I couldn't make it last few weeks as I went to New York City. Oh, okay. You just missed Dan. Seems like in the meantime, a few games got a terrible launch. Any indie game I might have missed in the meantime as well?
I've got an indie game or two to sell in a second when we're talking about what I'm playing.
Okay, yeah. Well, we'll get to that here shortly then, Gecko, because I can mention a couple as well. Cool. Hope the trip went well.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. Especially if you're coming from Europe, might have been your first time. I don't really know, but yeah, cool. All right. Yeah, so why don't we get to what we're currently playing? Ho, go ahead and hit us off.
Sure. So on the indie game spectrum, I would like to sell a game called Wild Frost. I don't know if you've played this one.
Nope.
No.
But it's a card game in a setup similar to what we're used to from a kind of Slay the Spire, roguelike, building a deck kind of game, but it uses a bunch of different kind of puzzle-based rules and things that I just think are really well thought out and that I haven't played before, which is what I'm always looking for from those games. And I almost didn't buy it because it had such a similar structure in terms of the screens that you could look at to those other types of games, Monster Train, which is excellent, Slay the Spire, that kind of game. But it is a game where the sun has gone out, and so everything is snowy, everything's kind of frost-filled, wild frost, right? And you're building a deck of cards and a town, and that deck of cards is going to get you through the fights that you have with enemies, but it's really very puzzle oriented. So it's got 2 rows of allies and enemies, and people that you put on the board have timers for when they hit, and then a lot of your cards are direct attacks that either slow a timer down or hit for damage, and you're constantly kind of moving cards around to try to manage the timers and put things where they need to be, all while building up your status. And the graphics are, it's a Chucklefish published game, so they have that kind of cute vibe, a Stardew Valley kind of vibe. and you're fighting evil penguins and that kind of thing. But for how cute it is really intellectually kind of stimulating and difficult from a mental perspective. So I couldn't recommend it more. Had a lot of fun with it this morning.
What is it on?
I'm playing it on the Switch. I think it's on everything.
Nice. Cool. I love that you're becoming a card game aficionado post-stroke. You're just like, what can I play? Card games.
Well,
I've always been before even ESO.
I've always been a strategy game lover, but yeah, I really enjoy that one, and I was almost late to the show because I was playing that game right before this. But I highly recommend that one. And then the game that I'm trying to play on PC that my brother says is excellent and it's gotten good reviews is Age of Wonders 4. If you're familiar with that series at all, technically not an indie since Triumph is now owned by Paradox, but I still think of it as an indie kind of game. Age of Wonders is an excellent series for those of you that are interested in kind of fantasy 4X strategy with tactical battles. It's just a great series.
Nice.
Yeah, I saw some people talking about that yesterday. It definitely has an audience that has been built up because of, from what I've read anyway, those games are really good. So shout out to Mr. Rodriguez, who's in the chat. He says, you guys want me to jump in live from a cemetery in Boston? I'm standing next to Paul Revere. No, you and
like Sleepy Hollow. I mean, it depends on what he's offering.
Right. British are coming. British are coming.
British are here.
They are, unfortunately.
Hey, stop that. So I'll talk. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, and I do want to promote it despite the issue I had, which is The Last Case of Benedict Fox. It is a kind of Metroidvania, spooky game that we talked about. So sadly, I was playing it more, and I was rather enjoying it. And they have a terrible bug in the game right now, where if you don't save and quit after you stop, you lose your progress.
Hell
so
yeah!
I lost multiple. Yeah, I lost multiple hours of progress, and then I got on to playing other games, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go back because I was so annoyed. But the developer has spoken out about it. Obviously, it's a pretty small team, and they have a patch. I believe if it's not already out, it's coming this week that will resolve that and some other kind of minor things. So if you want to wait and check it out, it's on Game Pass. It's on PC and everything as well. But I would recommend waiting for that update and then checking it out because it is pretty cool. It's unique, and it had some kind of intriguing things that was that were happening before I lost my progress, which is disappointing.
So that's one that I was really looking forward to, and I might have just been in a bad mood or something. But I tried to play it when it came out for an hour or so, and it was just annoying me with clunkiness. Okay. I just didn't have a good time. So if there's still good stuff in there, I'd like to get into it. I really liked the trailer from, I think it was an Xbox Direct kind of thing.
It was like an ID thing, ID at Xbox, yeah.
Yeah, and I really liked the look of it. I liked the look of it even playing it just now, but it was just super clunky to me. And again, I'm not the best person to be judging how these games play because I have to kind of maneuver my hand around, but it just wasn't working for me when I tried.
Yeah, it's got a few, it's got its indie small developer jank, you know what I mean? But there's something there. There's something worth playing. Silken it, funny enough, just said, sorry, Travis. He said, I finished Benedict Fox yesterday. Good game. Really love the atmosphere and lore. Kind of man the platforming, which is what I was getting as well.
So you're playing two clunky indie Metroidvania games with questionable platforming. Ains.
Oh, what? What's the other one? Oh,
I don't the pumpkin one, right?
That's right, baby. Romancelvania.
I said last week I was going to get back to stream it this week. It was a rough week. I got to be honest. I know. With at work, a couple days, I just went to bed. So I will get back to it. I promise.
This is why I have trust issues.
Yeah, I know. I'm telling you. Pumpkin Patch is sitting there waiting for me, and I've let her down. So I'll get back to it. Anyone playing Ravenlock? Has anyone tried Ravenlock here? You guys?
I have tried Ravenlock.
I previewed it like a year ago. That's what I know about that game. I played it a long time ago.
I honestly didn't even know what kind of game it was. I knew it had that kind of, I don't know, blocky, voxel-looking graphic setup, and I knew it was kind of a riff on Alice in Wonderland. But when you first start the game, it's almost an adventure game. You're doing like little tasks around the farm. And so I didn't know what I was in for, but I did finally get to what I think is Wonderland. It's called something else. But that's all that I've played of it. Have either of you played more of it?
No, it's
No,
on
I've
my
wanted to.
desktop. Unwatched.
I spoke to Miles about it, who reviewed it, and he said it's only about a 4-hour game. It's short, apparently.
Nice. Cool.
But a lot of people have already finished it, saying it's actually quite good. So it's another one that launched on Game Pass this week. I think is it Coco Cumber? What's the name of the developer? Small developer again. They're the ones who did Neon Generation. I'm forgetting the names this morning. But anyway, getting a lot of kind of positivity said about it. So I would definitely give that a look. If
it seemed functional, I was enjoying it. I didn't know I was signing up for an adventure game when I started it, so I just wasn't up for that right then.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Hoeg's had a lot of missed connections in video games lately. That's what I'm learning.
I mean, I think that happens a lot to me, where it's just like, whoa, no, that's not quite what I wanted to play, and especially when you're plucking things off a Game Pass, where you're like, I'm not even reading descriptions. It's like, this is the Alice in Wonderland game. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not even reading descriptions. It was very funny.
That's the developer, Coco Cucumber. And it was Echo
delicious.
Generation.
They
Echo
made that
Generation
game,
was their was their prior game. So I'll get there.
I would love a Coco Cucumber. That sounds fantastic.
Sounds like a weird mix. I don't know about that.
I'm into it.
You would be. You want that scooped, sir?
Take out all the good stuff, bro. Come on.
He's not scooping that. He's putting sriracha on it. Come on.
Yeah, actually. Well, if it's chocolate, though, I don't know.
You're probably still putting sriracha on it. Don't lie.
I don't really like to mix. You know, people, they'll put like salt on a cookie. I'm not about that. I think the savory and sweet they're not in cahoots. They are enemies.
I can basically vouch for all cookies having salt, Travis.
I mean, you know what I'm talking about, where they sprinkle sea salt on the top of it and they try to give it like a savory kick. And I'm just not about that life.
I agree with you. I'm not about that either.
Yeah, I don't
Let
think I've ever had
the
a
cookie be a
with salt
cookie
on it. But
you've never had a cookie with salt on it? Really?
I don't think
That's
so.
like super common in California. Like everybody's all about mixing sweet and savory, and I'm like, y'all are crazy. Like, I get you're being hella foodie and bougie, but like, go away.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, Travis, but I could eat like chocolate pretzels until the bag was empty. So
fair.
I can't say that I've ever had a chocolate pretzel or even seen one.
What?
Okay.
Yeah.
See, these are regional differences, folks.
Wait,
you've never seen one? Are you being serious right now? You're just messing around.
Oh, you're talking about the tiny ones that are
I mean, they can be in stick form, they can be tiny, they can be big. Yeah.
Yeah, just chocolate covered pretzels.
I've never seen like an actual pretzel covered in chocolate. I've never seen that. No.
Not like the big doughy German pretzel covered in chocolate. He's talking about like normal, small.
Those aren't
sticks.
normal. Those are miniaturized. The normal one is the big one. That's the original pretzel. The one
I've never had anybody dispute that little pretzels are still pretzels.
I didn't think a dispute of chocolate covered pretzels was where we were going to go today.
They're mini pretzels, guys.
Well, if you go on Amazon and try to order a bag of chocolate covered pretzels, they're not going to be the large mall pretzels.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah.
Oh my God. Star Wars, guys. I wanted to talk about Jedi Survivor a little bit. Yeah, I know. You went to pretzel land for some reason. Star Wars, guys, despite its kind of inherent jank and some of the frame rate issues, is excellent. I'm having a fantastic time with it. I'm definitely enjoying it more than Fallen Order. Not that Fallen Order was bad. I just think that this kind of expands on it in ways that matter to me. I really, really enjoy, what's the name of the first planet, the huge one? Kobo or something?
Oh, Kobo, yeah.
Yes, Coruscant is technically the first planet.
Yeah, sorry. But that one, just being able to explore and do things at my own pace and actually having some pretty well-designed kind of hidden things, to discover on your own, and discoverability and explorability is really, really good, and I'm digging it. What's that face?
So good.
Oh yeah, it is. No, it really is. I didn't expect that level of that aspect out of this game, and it has pleasantly surprised me. So
it keeps doing that. It does that through the entire game, where you're like, oh, I didn't know we were doing this. Damn, boy.
Okay.
It's got a lot of like interesting like depth, and it goes in directions and adds stuff where you're like, wow, I was not expecting that in this game. I don't know why, but it totally makes sense. And one of them is definitely like that open world hub of Kobo and how it just keeps expanding and getting
Just
bigger
keeps
and
getting bigger and bigger. Yeah.
just keeps getting bigger as you unlock stuff.
And
And
you just look at that map when you start out that level, and it's like 2% after you've been playing for an hour, and you're like, okay, all right.
this is gonna be a big
Yeah.
one.
I've
It's the
played for
meme
several
time.
hours now exploring everywhere, and I'm at like 50%. You know, I was like,
Yeah.
Jesus. All right.
So I beat Jedi Survivor last night.
You did.
Did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did.
I'm going to be well behind on that because I can
I
play it for about an
figured.
hour.
Yeah,
It's
I
a pretty
figured.
big game,
I figured.
too.
I basically was like, I went through maybe 70% of the game as if I was going to do a completionist, and then I looked at the calendar and I was like, I'm starting a review next week. If I don't finish it now, the Diablo 4 train starts and I am screwed. So I just was like, you know what, go through it, get through the game, beat it last night right before bed, and I'm excited to hopefully 100% it and then do New Game Plus, because New Game Plus looks like it's crazy. They add some stuff I was not expecting as well with New Game Plus. So
Really?
great game. One of the twists I called as soon as the game started, but then they hit me with a second twist that I didn't see coming, and I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. Had some really epic moments. 9 out of 10. That's my score.
That's funny you say that, Travis, because I thought some of the dialogue and plotting in the Coruscant, which is, for those that haven't played it, is kind of like the get to know the buttons level. It's a little longer than that, but they have a little bit of plot in it, and some of the story there suggested. I was like, well, if they know what they're doing based on the title of the game in this conversation, then I have a feeling I understand where they're going with this plot.
Yep.
So that'll be interesting.
So basically my theory based on that opening was correct, but then there's a additional twist on top of that they do a really good job at layering kind of their reveals, and I love how much it interacts with the High Republic storyline. Like
that was a big surprise to me when you're on Kobo and you get the High Republic flashback, and I was like, oh, as you just said, are we doing this?
Yeah, I was like, bro, are these the Nihil showing up like in our current game, the Star Wars game? Really, really cool interlinking, and it's a love letter for Star Wars fans for sure. And
yeah, it's got
right.
It's got a real Picard season 3 vibe coming right off of that project for me. So it's like, yep, this is a lot of fan service, but it's well organized, and I'm looking forward to it. My description of it is it's rad, but I can only play it for about an hour at a time.
It is
well, it's funny because I'm nowhere near the Star Wars fan you guys are, but it's still kind of striking that vibe. Like it instills that sense of kind of, this is going to sound maybe a little too high, but like childhood wonder, if you will, of just kind of Star Wars and the world and everything to go around with it. And there's some good character building already. I'm on the whatever the sand planet is now, Jaga or what have you, and I've been there for a few hours. Jeddah. So I'm probably like 12 hours in, maybe something like that, 14 hours. I don't know. Nice. By the way, our reviewer is in the chat who reviewed it for us. He said, to me, Jedi Survivor deserves to be in that Assassin's Creed 2 level sequel jump conversation. So thoughtfully designed, and Respawn knocked it out of the park, even with the tech instability. Yep. So shout out to Alex who reviewed it for us. He gave it a very high score as well. Really loved it. So
and I did encounter occasional, the frame rate is not stable in that game. That's just true on console, even in quality mode. But I think as long as you're hitting 30 to 40 frames, that game works. It doesn't require like a super fast frame rate just because of the type of game it is. So it mostly was fine for me. And then I think the game crashed twice. But those aren't the things I think about when I think about the 50 hours I played that game or whatever. I just think about like how great it was, and I couldn't stop playing it. And the technical issues for me are kind of a footnote. So I get why reviewers ended up with high scores on this one, even though there are technical issues. And that's just a personal preference thing, right? There's some people where if the game doesn't run 60 FPS, it's a 1 out of 10 for them. And I don't necessarily respect those people, but that's an opinion you can have.
It's the thing about video games, because I think if you're reviewing what the game is, then that's different than reviewing what the technical aspects are. And so that's an interesting conversation. I was thinking about this the other day, and it's like, well, I evaluate board games, for instance, more on what the game design is than how nice the pieces are, but you can review it both ways. And that's totally the same for video games. And like, it's clear Jedi Survivor is a well-designed game with a lot of good ideas. And yes, my frame rate bounces much more than I would like it to. And I moved it down from performance to quality because performance just wasn't even close for me. And yet I can see all of the goodness and enjoyment that lives in that game. And so I don't have any problem with anybody giving it a high score.
Yeah. I generally agree as well. It's not, and to your point, Travis, you say it crashed twice over 50 hours. I think it crashed once for me so far. But the thing about it, like, I compare it to like Returnal when I was reviewing Returnal, right? Where I was getting crashes often, and those crashes were making me lose an hour or two of progress at a time. That is maddening, right? That impacts your ability to enjoy the game. Whereas if when I crash in Jedi, I start it back up. I'm literally standing right where I was previously. I lose maybe a minute. You know what I mean? It's not really impacting me too negatively, even though it's frustrating. It's not super negative. So funny. Mrs. Hoeg says, "Nice to see a Star Wars something be received so well," which is kind of funny, really, because I don't see a lot of pushback. I don't see a lot of pushback on Star Wars Jedi Survivor as being a great game. It seems most Star Wars fans love this, and yet if a new movie came out today, as well as I do, there'd be people praising it and people hating it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that some people have a weird pessimism about Star Wars, even though a lot of the stuff we get recently is good. Like, we're right off the heels of a really good Star Wars show. I think that everybody agreed that show was great.
But Mando 3 came and swooped in the middle of that sequence.
I mean, you get a little bit of good. You get a little bit of good and a little bit of bad, but like Andor is not that far away, and people, I think, largely the Star Wars community embraced that and said it was really dang good. So there's a lot of good Star Wars happening right now. I think
still haven't watched it.
I think Mando just brought back the pessimism because it did have that kind of missed.
I don't think Mando needed any help bringing back the pessimism. Star Wars fans are very pessimistic people.
I think there's a lean towards that direction after the last decade of Star Wars care. But
just the last decade, not the last 2 decades.
No, not the last 2 decades.
Over the prequels.
Well, no. we're not going down the Star Wars route.
Nope, not the last 2 decades at all.
Last Jedi will come up, and then all hell will break loose.
Nope. Nope. Other than you bringing it up. No, 2012 is the year of our end. The Mayans predicted it, and they were right. But that's when Star Wars died, not 1999.
Interesting theory. By interesting, I mean wrong, of course. But
I know you do.
Yeah, moving on. Yaga says, "What's up, man?" He says, "Finished Jedi Survivor last night, finally at 71 hours. Sadly, Kabo isn't fully explored. It's at 95%. That's still pretty damn good, man. So it's close, but Jedi Survivor is my game of the year. I give it a 10 out of 10. So I see a lot of
early,
a lot of people.
Still early
for game of the year. You mean?
Well, this coming month is insane, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, the return of Zelda, the return of Diablo, the return of Final Fantasy. That's a sequence.
Yeah, a return of Street Fighter as well. I mean, I know fighting games are kind of out there, but still, it's a huge IP.
I mean, that game will be on the game of the year list.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Street Fighter 6, Diablo 4, probably Jedi Survivor. I bet you Jedi Survivor will lose because of the technical stuff.
Think about that for a second. In 2023, we're getting a new Diablo, new Street Fighter, new Final Fantasy, and new Zelda in 1 month. Yeah, that's bonkers, man.
It is.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Is it in 1 month?
Well,
it's like 6 weeks. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because Zelda's this week. I mean, as we're talking.
I know it is.
Yeah.
I got friends playing that game.
Nice. Can't talk about it. Go ahead, break. You're not reviewing it. Go ahead and break their embargo.
Fun fact for those who don't know: when your friends are under embargo, if they share information with you that is under embargo, you are subject to the same rules that they agreed to.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
You'd be fine. Go ahead. Talk about it.
Well, subject to is kind of a subjective standard anyway, right? Which is like legally you haven't received consideration on any of that. So you don't actually have a contractual commitment. You have I'm going to get fired and or punished by the company commitment.
But the precedent for embargo breaking is that the contract is sort of there to represent a relationship of trust, and that nobody ever pursues legal action against somebody for breaking embargo in the games industry. I've never even heard of that. What happens is if you break embargo, that company just holds that over your head for as long as they can, and they stop talking to you because the trust is gone. And so if I broke embargo, then my outlet wouldn't be trusted and I wouldn't be trusted. And that's really the point of an embargo. It's to kind of put on paper a implicit kind of relationship of trust, and you're agreeing to trust fall a little bit.
No, I get it. I agree with you completely. That's what I was trying to say, is that contractually, legally, you're not bound to an embargo.
Yeah.
But totally understand from the relationship standpoint.
Especially when your entire kind of business model is built upon having early access to those things that you're talking about. So, yeah. Funny enough, someone I haven't listened to it, but ACG, one of the biggest kind of YouTube creators out there, he apparently mentioned on his show, if you saw, he accidentally broke the embargo for Redfall with his video. He went in the morning, which a couple sites did. He mentioned apparently on his show yesterday or Friday that Bethesda has told him, shouldn't have done that.
You're out.
You're out. So
I mean, probably well earned.
Embargo time to 8.
Yeah, it was a weird time for sure.
Probably well earned, but 8 p.m. is very unusual. But I think that's one of the problems of being a one-man shop, which a lot of YouTubers are, is there's no person checking your work, and IGN's got like 15 people looking at the embargo. Somebody's going to catch it, so it's just a different situation. But yeah, especially when you have a bad review, double check that embargo. If your review is negative,
no kidding,
do not want to seem like you are being vindictive and targeting them by releasing it early, which is what it probably came off as to the publisher. So yeah, if you've got a very low score or a very high score, I'd double check that embargo, triple check it.
Yeah, I generally am the one who hits publish on everything that comes out of SG, and I check embargo. Like, even at the time when I know it's the time and I'm about to hit publish, I check it again, like just constantly, because it's just, we can't risk it. So, well, why don't we go ahead and transition to Redfall then? So Redfall, both Travis and I were playing it. We couldn't talk about it on last Sunday's show because the embargo was Monday. Obviously, I would say that the biggest kind of gaming discourse that happened this week was around Redfall and then Xbox, which is going to be our main topic for today. But I'll talk a little bit about Redfall because I am the one that reviewed it for SG. To be very clear up front, and I put this in my review, I reviewed it on PC. I specifically asked for a PC code from Bethesda because of the 30 FPS conversation, and I wanted to see how it was optimized on PC. The good news for PC players, and I've now played it on both, by the way, the good news for PC players is it's actually optimized quite well. I had no issues on PC. I was using, it supports DLSS for NVIDIA users and FSR for AMD users. It also supports the Intel version. I forget what that is, like XES or something. So I was running it on DLSS at all ultra or epic, I think they call it, settings, and I was running like, super high frame rate, no issues, super smooth. It never crashed on me once in the single player campaign. I didn't have any technical issues, I guess is the quickest thing to say in terms of Redfall. I played co-op with Miles a little bit, and I was also talking to Travis about it, as who I believe, I know Miles was on Xbox. You were on Xbox at the time as well, Travis. And from what I've played and what you and Miles have told me, Xbox is a decidedly different experience as it sits today. In terms, it's limited at 30 frames. It's
it doesn't hit 30 frames.
Doesn't hit 30 frames consistently. It's not locked. There's texture pop-in issues. There's a lot of kind of things like that I didn't see on the PC side.
Is it pop-in, or is it just set to try to get to 60 and they never turned them back up? Because like things on the side of trucks and signs, they're just not in at all for me, at least.
I think it tries to get to 30 and has trouble because I don't think they had any chance to optimize. They didn't even have a chance to finish the game. Really, my problem with that game is not anything. The technical stuff, I assume, will wash out, and it was annoying, and I had crashes and stuff like that. But the real problem with that game is that none of it feels good. Like, the combat feels terrible. The movement feels terrible. The AI and enemies you're fighting are like super uninteresting and boring. And I mean, to me, that game is like an easy 4 out of 10. Like, just
it reminds me so much of Deathloop.
You didn't play enough of it though, Travis.
It reminds me so much.
I played more.
People just charge you. You're just shooting things in a roving shooting gallery. I mean, it's the same problems as Deathloop.
I don't think how much of the game have you played, Hoeg?
How much of Redfall have I played?
Yeah,
A couple hours.
So
yeah, it is significantly worse than Deathloop. Like from a gameplay,
it is.
like just movement, dude.
Yeah.
You feel like you're floating, like you're playing a floating camera in a creator mode. It's really it feels
feel like
awful.
you're shooting with a laser pointer, but I don't know that that's different from Deathloop.
It definitely is.
It's definitely worse than Deathloop. I said in my review the thing that, you know, besides the obvious kind of narrative conversation around this game, the thing that was going to hurt it most when I said was going to hurt it most was the first impression it makes, which is not good. It doesn't start well. The AI is generally atrocious. I mean, I think I joked in my review, like, you know, it's like whenever more guys come to fight you, it's like they're calling on B-movie actors onto a set. It's that bad. They're just kind of like all over the place. They don't really know what they're doing. And there's other fundamental issues with the design that you can see were not fleshed out. Like the thought process was there, but to Travis's point, it's clear that they just couldn't fully flesh out the ideas. And I wrote about that extensively, such as like the looting. The looting's not very good. It tries to be Borderlands in terms of its loot design and kind of discoverability, but it doesn't. It's not even as good as Borderlands 1 in that regard. It's just very repetitive in that aspect. It tries to do narrative things in the environment in terms of discovering background stories and things kind of like Prey, right? And piece together this larger story that took over Redfall and what happened, but it doesn't do it nearly as well as Prey. I mean, most games don't do it as well as Prey, but it's got all the aspects of a good Arcane game, but none of them are fully fleshed out. And that's what's so disappointing about it, because the setting is okay. You know, I like the setting. I like the ideas behind it. And as I wrote in my review, which is the most frustrating part of reviewing Redfall and talking to people, not you guys, but just the conversation around it in the first couple hours, is that the back half of the game is noticeably better than the first half of the game. And that doesn't save it. That doesn't excuse it from all the issues it has. But it's like, if you experience the whole game, it does some good things by the end, and in the second half that you're like, I can see what they were going for here. There's some really cool design features, and there's some cool level design later on in the game. The story actually has more heart than you would think it has, and it has some commentary on things, but just the implementation in several key areas was a letdown. And I know we're going to talk more about it broadly in terms of Xbox, but this game shouldn't have released as it is. It just shouldn't have. So it's disappointing. I was in about the 5.5, 6.5. I was in that 6 range as I was getting later in the game, and I brought it up to a 7 only because, like I said, there's some really good stuff later on in the game that you experience. I was like, okay, when you look at the big picture, I brought it up to a 7, but I don't fault anyone for giving this game a 6, or, you know, even in the 5-ish range. It has a lot of issues.
Well, the trick for me, Ains, is that, like, I've tried to engage with it a number of times now because I was interested in the property and I like Arcane in general. Yep. And like, it keeps kicking me out. Like, I'm not having fun. So I don't know that I'll ever get to that second half of the game.
Yeah, and I write that in my review. I'm like, the problem is that people aren't going to make it to the good stuff, because I was reviewing it, so I had to, right? But I can perfectly see that.
I made it to the good stuff, and I didn't think it was good.
You have not. 10 hours, you didn't make it to the good stuff. It's a 25-hour game.
I've played almost 20 hours. I've played more than the 10 hours since the last time you played, because I had to play with Destin Legary, and he, you know, we went through most of the game together. I mean, my experience with that, especially being a co-op partner, Ains, which I don't think you experienced.
Co-op's not very good, by the way.
Co-op is not only not very good, it punishes you for playing co-op. You gain no progress on your character.
That's true.
Nothing. So I was basically, you know, Destin's water boy that entire, you know, playthrough, and then I go back to my profile and I'm just at the very beginning, right where
they told you that ahead of time, though. I mean, they make that clear.
I know, but it's still bad. It's like I don't really have a choice. You have to play
I agree.
co-op with somebody, and yeah. So Destin and I did like all the way up to the first god, and then he advanced to the second area, and then he called me back to help him with that. And so, that's probably not the best way to experience the game, is in snippets from your co-op partner, having to help him out as he drags you through the campaign. But I that's the way a lot of people are going to experience it. And I just got snippets of like a bad story with really, really awful fundamentals. That's the part I just can't get over, is the fundamentals are so bad. Like, even if the stuff like they introduce new enemies and mechanics that are more interesting, I mean, they're never going to make gunplay feel better, right? Gunplay's bad the whole game, right?
Yeah,
Haynes?
I wouldn't say it's terrible, but it's not great. I mean,
yeah,
which is kind of like my statement about a lot of aspects of the game. I wouldn't say it's terrible, but it's certainly not good. I don't
think it's ever been Arcane's skill set. I mean, even if you go back to Dishonored or Prey, which is my favorite game of theirs, it's not like they're excelling at that 30-second loop of Destiny or anything else. It's everything that's around it that Arcane was good at, and that doesn't exist in Redfall, at least as far as I've gotten.
No, it doesn't. It's there. It's just not implemented well.
I mean, combat in Dishonored 2 specifically is quite good. They rely on like a lot of stealth, obviously, which is a different thing. I could not believe, by the way,
it's like the shooting mechanics are never Arcane.
I could not believe that there are no stealth takedowns in the game.
No, you just smack them and they go flying.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like I was like, dude, this is an Arcane game. I snuck up behind a vampire and it's crazy. I was like, what?
Right at the beginning, like the very opening of the game, you come out of this ship that's basically, kind of wrecked, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. There's some enemies. It does the typical Arcane play how you want at the start and figure your way through. So I went and snuck up behind enemies, to your point, Travis. And the first time I snuck up right behind some guy, and I'm like, okay, there's no prompt. So I just meleeed him, and they just went, and fell over. And I'm like, oh my God, that looks really rough. Like, what am I in for here?
So yeah, I've now played about like 15 to 18 hours, probably somewhere in that window, but like all incongruous, like helping another person get through parts of the game type, which is not a way I would recommend experiencing the game. But also just like every time I jump back into it and I see what part of the game Destin's playing through, I'm just like, this still feels terrible. Like the only thing that was halfway interesting was the vampire layers. Is that what they're called? Where you go in, you do a little like layer exploration. We did a couple of those together.
Are you talking about the gods?
No, the layers.
There's vampire layers where they take over like a region of the city that you have to clear out.
No, I'm talking about the one where you go through a door.
Yeah, so that's the gods. So I don't want to spoil anything, but you go into the psyche. And those are the best areas in the game, and I put that in my review. Right, it's like you go into the Twilight Zone basically, and you go into the mind. It's like an alternate dimension where you go into the psyche of the vampire gods. That's what that is. Well, there's three of them.
Is that the one? Oh no. So you're thinking of something else then? Because I'm thinking of like they pop up regularly, and at the end,
those are the nests.
Nests. Thank you. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay,
nests.
Sorry.
The nests I thought were okay.
Nests are fine. Yeah.
The fact that you get a ton of loot at the end helps, and you have to make a mad dash to grab as much of it as you can before you get kicked out. I thought that was okay, but yeah, we also did one of the god layers together as well. And yeah, I mean, even when stuff gets slightly more interesting in the story and the areas that you're in, the gameplay, I just can't get over how like laughably bad it is. And maybe that just matters more to me, that it's just doesn't feel good to play, but it hurt
in the moment. That's definitely what
just in the moment.
Yeah, it doesn't evolve much either. Like you don't even, like if you're going for a Borderlands type thing, which clearly they were, right? 4 characters, they have unique abilities and ultimate and skill trees and stuff, but the skill trees barely do anything really meaningful.
Yeah.
Your abilities never evolve. There's no way to do an actual build for your character. It's just, like I said, the concepts are there. They're just not well implemented.
And for me, as an Arcane fan, I just really think that the story and narrative presentation never arrived. I was so surprised when you turn that game on and you get like a kind of motion comment. You get like a kind of motion comic from a character that you have no idea who it even is. It doesn't relate to you at all.
Yeah,
and then
that comes later.
And then your game just starts. And it's like Prey is such a good opening to that game.
Brilliant.
They spend the time to really put you in that universe and then drop stuff on you. And Dishonored has some similar stuff with the Wailing Town and other things that happen in Dishonored 2, that it was just a big surprise to me that it just felt like it just started. Here you go, here's Redfall. Because one of the things that I had always thought watching the trailers or the previews of the game was, that doesn't look that interesting to me. You can hear me on these streams talking about that. But I figured that Arcane would have some kind of introduction or setup for the world that would get you involved in it, right? The Redfall logo is suggestive of a kind of Stephen King story or something else. Instead, it's just like, the vampires are here. They've been in the town forever. The sun's gone. Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And all of the explanation to that and what happened and everything is there. It just comes very late. And that's what I mean. There's no investment. You nailed it, Hoeg. There's no player investment on driving towards what that is. It just kind of happens later in the game. Yeah, it's a shame.
By the way,
it's a shame.
I saw an ad for Redfall this week, and it had full live action cutscenes that looked gorgeous, and I was like, "Wow, that is incredibly false advertising." Like, none of the there's nothing of that quality in terms of like cinematics or cutscenes in
No, the
game.
slideshow that you mentioned, Hoeg, the comic look, that's the whole game. It never changes from that.
And I'm not one that
crazy
generally argues against that so much. As a PC game player, you get that a lot. For instance, Age of Wonders, the game I was just talking about earlier, is primarily that kind of three-dimensional parallax motion comic looking cutscenes. That's usually what a smaller team can put together. But even there, even allowing for that, it just doesn't start where the story should start. I don't think it's in media res, but it's not even compelling from the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know. I sigh because I'm frustrated. I was very hyped for this game. To Travis's credit, and Hoeg's credit, actually, to both your credit, you kind of nailed, that this game was had a lot of red flags, and when you are excited for something, you want to overlook those red flags and cross your fingers, right? And the fact is that the red flags were definitely shown in its release. And as I said, it's this weird thing. Like I put 27 or 28 hours in for the review. And I started again. After you beat the game, you unlock a fourth difficulty. There's, New Game Plus. But even the New Game Plus, the design aspects are weird. So two things, more on the design, is you finish the first island. So it never indicates to you that the first Redfall island is the first. You think that's the world, right? So you start exploring and stuff. You beat the first vampire god, which leads into the story about the second vampire god. And then all of a sudden you go to a new area of Redfall, and it's a new island. So there's two open world maps. But as soon as you go to the second one, you cannot go back to the first. Everything you've done there is gone. You can't revisit it at any time. And the second map is better. It has more interesting landmarks, more interesting missions, and things like that I call out. But again, you then beat two vampire guys. You beat the game. You fight the final boss. I won't spoil anything. You beat the game. After you beat the game, it takes you back to the menu screen, and that's it. You can't go back to the world you were just playing in. So anything you left or side quests or anything else, they're gone. You then start a new game if you want to, and you're back on the first island where everything starts anew. So again, it's just like
it's a looter game where it discards your loot at the end.
No. I'm sorry. You keep your skills, your loot, and all that. Okay. You keep all that, so but you can't go back. Yeah, you can't go back to the world though. It's not like continue playing, and then if you want to start New Game Plus, do this. It just ends. It's frustrating, but I think
spoil away, Ains. I don't think Hoeg or I are destined for the credits here.
Well, I knew there was a second map because somebody had DM'd me that, but I was like, I'm never going to get there because I can't. I'm just not engaging with this while I play it.
Yeah, and it's just frustrating. The weird thing is yesterday I was sitting there. I couldn't play Battlefield like I joked on PC, and I was like, man, I kind of want to play some Redfall. But then I started thinking about it. I'm like, why? What would I actually go in there and do? And there's just not a lot of compelling content to go in there and do. So it's a shame. I don't know what else to say about it other than it's a shame. with Prey being one of my favorite games of the last decade, and Arcane Austin, you know, I really thought they were going to kind of land this, and I'm sure at some point we'll get the full story of what happened here. But it's a shame. No matter, something happened, right? And I wish that it would have landed in a better place. So
yeah, I think that's one of the things that social media sometimes misses. Is like, I would love for it to be great. I want to play good games. I want to be engaged by these things. I was not happy when the first notes started coming out where people said, "Oh, this might not be very good," or "I'm not enjoying my playthrough." Those kinds of early leaks were like, "Oh no, I want it to be good." And I think there is stuff there in Redfall. I feel like you, Ains, which is like, they have a good enough hook with some of the vampire stuff and some of the stuff in the town.
There's stuff there
where I keep thinking I want to play it, and then I go play it, and it's like, nope, I did not enjoy this at all.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And people, Darren just asked, and I saw some others ask, and people have asked me on the other show I did earlier this week, like, do I think Arcane and Xbox or Bethesda will fix it in quotes? So the interesting thing about this, if you're not aware, right, is they've sold a player pass with this game. There's a $30 pass with this game that comes with 2 new characters that they are going to create, right? Like a Borderlands. So
like the Game Pass thing, right? They need to go get the money out.
Right. So obviously Arcane has already invested into continuing development on this game. So they can add 2 characters. That won't fix it, because its characters aren't the problem, really. Well, the adding 2 player characters isn't going to fix the problems with the game. Now, the question is, will they spend enough time and development and money to fundamentally improve some of the core aspects of the game, right? Start to improve the AI in some fashion to where it's competitive or at least marginally intelligent. The bigger thing for me is, can they rebuild some of the skill trees to make them meaningful? Can they improve and add to the loot and the variety and the activities for the player to actually just go fight stuff and earn loot and, you know, have fun in the world? I don't know. And I don't even know what that looks like, because I don't think those are inconsequential things, right? I think you would need a pretty big team for a pretty large amount of time to do those things. And I don't know if that investment is going to be there for a game that already is tainted now. Yeah, because how many players are you going to get to revisit it?
I would not throw money after this. Honestly, I think the impression I get is they already threw too much at it.
Yeah. Which speaks to development troubles or problems or, you know, whatever else that went on.
And it's not like one of those things where, you know, Sea of Thieves comes out and everybody's like, "Oh, this is great. It's just missing content. It needs to get built out and you need stuff in it." It's like the game came out and they're like, "Wow, I don't like this at all." And they're like, "Yeah, well, let's add more to it." And I don't know if it has the path forward like a No Man's Sky or Sea of Thieves. I just don't know.
No, that's what I mean. It's not, to your point, it's not just adding to it, right? It's fundamental design changes to the way things are implemented.
Yeah.
As led by the people that just designed it. I mean, like,
yeah, I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I would love for it to, because again, I keep saying this, but there is something there. Like, the setting's cool. The soundtrack, I interviewed JB who did the soundtrack's awesome. But it feels lost in a game that doesn't deserve it, really. And it just, to Hoeg's point, they set this up as this kind of northeastern coastal town Stephen King-ish vibe, which is a fantastic setting for a video game. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And it doesn't do it. I don't know what else to say at this point. You can read my review.
Like there should be a beat before the vampires really show up, or that you're dealing with stuff, and then suddenly it's a vampire attack or whatever, and like it's just not there. It just starts after I think the game should start, and I don't know exactly why that is or what happened there, but maybe it's the marketing setting up an expectation that's undeserved for what they were even aimed at. Maybe it's, like I said, the fonting in the logo is very specific to like pulp novel.
Yeah,
and it just isn't there.
Yeah. No, it's not.
I'll tell you who I think benefited the most from Redfall, at least in my own personal experience. It's Dead Island 2. Because like you're in an American cityscape, you're fighting bad things in hordes, and like it feels so much better than it even did a month ago or whenever it came out a couple weeks ago after playing Redfall. It's like, oh yeah, this game knows what it's doing.
Fair. Yeah, I had the only problem I had with Dead Island 2 was some of the level design, but other than that, to your point, it did exactly what it set out to do. It does it well. It's polished. It's fun to play to a degree. I mean, I don't think it's excellent, but in terms of comparing it to Redfall and what it set out to do, I would agree with you entirely. Our brother Arch, shout out to Arch over there at World of Gaming. He says, "I'm done with the game. 6 hours across console and PC, and honestly, and this is how I think most people are feeling. There are simply better games out there that deserve my time." And
Opportunity cost is a thing.
Yeah, that's the state of the gaming industry right now. There are too many options. If you come out and you land flat, recovery from that is nigh, unless you have something truly unique.
That's absolutely what I mean with Dead Island 2. It's right. If I'm in the brainscape of wanting to kill some Evil Dead things in a first-person shooter, then I'm playing Dead Island 2 if those are next to each other on my Xbox menu.
Yeah. Well, that's enough on Redfall. Let's transition to the overall kind of Xbox. We're going to touch on, obviously, Phil Spencer's interview, which was big news this week over at Kind of Funny, and some of the comments there. I have some things I want to ask you guys because I think we actually have some diverging kind of thoughts around where Xbox is, not only today, but in what they need to do. So we'll talk about that. Let me grab these few super chats that have been sitting out there real quick. So Shoosh, good afternoon, good morning. He says €5 super chat. Is Redfall now a reference to the Steam review chart with red downward bars?
Sad, but maybe.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm not as down on it as others, but it's very clear it's not a great game. It's just not. Yeah, I mean, is what it is. So, Shoosh, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate you. RGMY, he by the way, who just became a channel member over at Season Gaming, so thank you for that. €5 super chat says, thanks for having Hoeg's back all this time. Of course.
Absolutely.
P.S. Ains, I kind of took your advice about my nickname. Travis.
Oh. That is a smiley face and a gamer controller. Game controller.
Unfortunately, still not a gamer. Sorry, guys. RGMY. Okay. What am I missing here?
Well, because the nickname appears to have been changed, it's kind of hard to track it back to what you might have advised on, Ains.
I don't remember. I don't remember at all. Let me know because I've completely forgotten. But appreciate you. Thanks for becoming a member. Fusion64 with a $2 super chat. Would this game have released if it wasn't on Game Pass?
Yes.
I mean, if it's not on Game Pass, it's not owned by Microsoft. So it kind of depends on what ZeniMax would do with it. So that's guessing in an alternative dimension.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the premise of the question, though.
Yeah. I think it probably still would have. I think it's just.
I think it would have.
The state of where the industry is, and where they were with this game. I still think clearly there's things that went on with the development of this game we don't know. Right? Something happened.
Well, this isn't unprecedented for Bethesda, even before Microsoft acquisition. They did this with the Wolfenstein side sequel. I reviewed it and I can't even remember what it's called.
Not New Blood.
Not New Blood and not New World Order, and
it's
not
the siblings, right? It's the kiddos.
The siblings. Yeah, it was sort of the same thing. It was like it came out and it's just like a wet fart, not what anybody wanted, and they sort of pushed it out while it still had technical issues. And while
Young Blood, New Blood, Blood is ringing a bell. Young Blood. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
but that was
like if somebody said Young Bloods. Yeah,
Young Bloods.
Right.
Hey, that's
very different.
Probably
game.
A better name.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Our German friend says that's not how you pronounce Wolfenstein.
That's fair.
Very fair.
That's how you pronounce it here.
Also fair. All right, guys. So, Redfall comes out. It's the first of what would be considered kind of the big releases for Xbox first party in 2023, right? After I think most of us agree they did not have a good 2022, and they recognized that, they acknowledged it. So a lot of people were looking at this game as the start of what should be a very good year for Xbox by the time we get to the end of it, assuming Starfield lands well, assuming Forza lands well. Apparently, probably another big first-party game releasing in the fall. We'll obviously talk more about that after the showcase next month. But it comes out, lands where it did, right? A lot of controversy this week about it. And Xbox team, a lot of their leaders even posting about it being a bad week for Xbox, which I think we'll get to because I found that weird. But Phil Spencer goes on Kind of Funny for a heart-to-heart interview. And I did finally catch up and watch it because I wanted to make sure I had watched it for this conversation. And I think there's a couple things in that interview that stuck out to me. And we'll get to those because I want to ask your guys' thoughts on them and add my own. But who wants to kind of start on Phil Spencer's interview, the wording around it, and where you think Xbox is sitting today? Is the overall consensus being overly dramatic because Redfall came out and just didn't have a great launch, right? So we've got this kind of doomsday scenario happening. Or do you feel it's warranted and there are kind of core fundamental repeating issues for Xbox as it stands today?
Can I say yes? I mean, yes. People.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Both.
Yes, people
Both
are
of those things
overdramatic.
are true.
Yes,
Yeah.
Xbox has issues. I think that Phil's interview was a good one. I think that people tend to take things in, let's not say out of context, but limited context and make them headlines and do articles on them and things like that.
Yes.
When I think if I'm going to criticize Phil Spencer on anything from that interview, it's that it almost sounded like he was talking a little bit more to investors or business folks than to gamers. And I think gamers are more likely to take some of that stuff out of context. One of the things I tweeted about was, the thing that became the big headline news item that day was that he said, we can't out console Nintendo and
Right.
Sony, and we're going in this different direction, which anybody that's followed any of this knows that Xbox has had as a philosophical core since the start of this generation. And now you get a little bit more understanding of why Phil thought that was necessary, but it doesn't change the story of what Xbox is or what they're trying to be. They're trying to be
it wasn't new. It's just people took it way out of context. Agreed.
Because it came across as a little negative. And I think, like I said, if I'm criticizing, you do have to be aware of what your audience is going to do with this kind of information. And
Sure.
say, we can't just get people to come over from Sony with good games is both true from a business perspective and smart from a leadership perspective, and probably not the way you want to deliver that message to the people that are listening to it
Fair.
as purchasers of your product. So
Yep.
I think it's kind of between two worlds there, because I look at it and say, that was a good interview. That was insightful and transparent, and I liked it. But I think from the fallout, it's also why, a PR person would say, this is why we have talking points. This is why you don't say it exactly this way. Even if it's the truth, you say it a slightly different way, because people are going to look at that and say, well, why did I buy this crap box if you're not even going to try to make good games on it, which is not what he said.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah.
Hard agree.
Yeah, I have a surprisingly similar take to Hoeg, which was that, I think Xbox does have issues. I don't think this is the toughest situation Xbox has ever faced. And I do think that there's people online being dramatic about just how bad things are. I mean, Xbox has had some good games this year. They've had some bad games this year. It's not the sky is falling. The Activision being blocked and the fact that they've invested so much time and, capital online into it is definitely tough, but they're going to continue to fight it. We're going to be talking about this in 2024, I'm sure. I think that was a really, really good interview for me, but I'm somebody who's in the industry, right? They weren't really speaking to the me's of the world, but it still came off as pretty good to me. It let me understand his philosophy and where his head's at with a bad game like this. And I thought it was a really adult, frank conversation, which works for some people, and other people are going to use that to tear down the platform and just, nitpick at it. But yeah, I think Redfall definitely was not the capper that Xbox needed on this already tough kind of couple weeks / months that they've had. And it was interesting to see Phil just let himself be sad on camera. I have a buddy who works on the Xbox team, and he said that even their internal team were really surprised by that interview and how frank he was. And they were like sharing the clip around at work and just being like, dude, look,
CEOs put on a face. I mean, I think we're used to it, but CEOs put on a face. Everything is okay. We've got a strategy. We're going in a different direction. We're taking care of the things that need to be taken care of. And Phil, I say to his credit, but reasonable minds can differ on even that and what the effects are when you're talking into a space like gaming. But I thought that it was good to see him transparent and essentially not turn the button on to just put the mask on and say we're going
agree.
to have strong leadership here. I like that, and I would like to encourage that for across the industry. But certainly with the reaction, we're not going to see it across the industry because Phil Spencer was basically slapped in his nose with a newspaper and said, "You put on the mask, or we're going to be upset."
Yeah, it's a shame, right? Because I think anyone who's worked, to Travis's point, in whether it's in kind of corporate leadership or kind of more familiar with the industry, as we're discussing right here, is you don't get real transparency an awful lot of the time,
and you see why.
And you see why, exactly, because yes, exactly. And I think that I've always been an advocate for how Phil communicates. I think he's very good at it. He's usually very good depending on the setting, depending on the audience. And I think you do have some correct criticisms, Hoeg, around, exactly what we saw this week after he spoke. But I personally liked the conversation. I thought that it was nice to see him being frank about some things. And there's a couple other, the reason I pulled out my phone, I actually took some notes while I was watching it because I want to ask you guys about these specific things. But on the one point about not going to kind of out console, he said, quote, "There's no world where Starfield is an 11 out of 10 and people sell their PS5s. And I think that going back to the context we're talking about, I took that as, one, he's correct, right? It's not that Starfield being an 11 out of 10 wouldn't get people interested in Xbox, may get people to check out the game or check it out on PC, what have you. What he was specifically referring to, which I want to touch on, is around losing the Xbox One generation hurt them more than I think most people realize, right? Because as he pointed out, that is the generation where this shift to digital happened, which hilariously enough is where Xbox One was aiming at the start of the generation, right? But we've covered that many times before. But it's where people built their digital libraries, their ownership, their kind of online gaming persona, and where they invested. And what he was kind of alluding to is that now that that investment is there, and they kind of lost that generation pretty badly, there's this ongoing what's the word I'm looking for here? There's this ongoing, I'm blanking.
Yeah,
it's like this ongoing effect, basically, where if someone is fully invested after what's now a decade, right, into the PlayStation ecosystem, right, one game or two is not going to just make someone say, "Oh God, I need to be an Xbox player now," because they have too much invested on one side of the house. And he was referring to the fact in this commentary that yes, we need to make great games, we need to support our console base, and we've been very clear about our ambitions for our ecosystem, right? We want players to play wherever they want to play, be it PC, be it cloud, etc. But people need to understand that us just developing great games is not just going to make them jump ship and Xbox is suddenly going to win the console generation. And I think people took that as Xbox is not as invested in making great games. They don't see it as important. And that's not what he said. That's not what he was kind of driving towards. And that goes back to people taking things out of context.
Right. I agree. And I think he is right, as you say, that people aren't going to sell their PlayStations. But I do think it comes across, especially in this environment, and you have to be cognizant of how people are going to take that message as a little bit too defeatist.
Agreed.
Right. Yeah. No, they're not going to sell their PlayStation 5 and move over to Xbox, but having a strong brand, a strong ecosystem is a part of selling the next Xbox, regardless of what they have under their TV, under their right now. So, I mean, I think it's not that he said that it wasn't, as you said, and it doesn't come across to me watching the whole interview, reading everything that has popped out of it as they're just giving up. But I do think just framing it in that specific way opens the door for people to read it as they don't want to be invested in this anymore.
Yeah. I get why people are reading it that way. It's especially, first of all, I thought the point was really interesting about, that was the worst generation to lose. I'd never thought about that, but it's true, right? Like that was the generation where people sort of started to decide where they were going to be living long term, and that's hard to win. But I do think the point he omitted, and maybe he should have said at that point in time, is that but if you still make good games, they might buy an Xbox as well. They still could be PS5 mains, but I think he's probably working under what I assume is a business reality that you can't have a successful, profitable console if you're only selling games that you made that are exclusive to your console. I don't know that is a business model that really anyone except for Nintendo can live by, right? You have to do well in third party. And I think his point is that third party is always going to be challenging for them because that people built their digital libraries on PlayStation, except for me.
I think it comes back to, it does sound like he's talking to an investor group. It sounds like he's talking to a boardroom. And I think I read it exactly as you did, Travis, which is, look, the reality is a given game or even a number of games in a row aren't going to move the needle on market share. So what we're doing philosophically is we're going through a different brand. We're doing something else with the money that we have, with the resources that we have. It's exactly the brand differentiation talk that I've heard CEOs give for years.
Yes.
Except that it was given to kind of funny and put out on there on the internet. So I think it's right. I think Microsoft is wise. Sony's got the first mover advantage. They have a machine that churns out games. And I think, Travis, you're right that you could have emphasized certain aspects of that. That doesn't mean we're not going to try to make great games, but it also doesn't mean that Sony and Nintendo are going to stop making great games, which overall is great for gamers. We're all entirely in favor of that, but it does mean that there's a certain amount of lock-in from the last generation from the fact that our competitors are good at making video games, which is great for everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed. And I think
I think you're right on the money, Hoeg. I think it was just wrong audience, but the right message, and that's something I wasn't really thinking about because I'm in the industry, and so it felt like he was talking to me, right? And that's
I enjoyed it, because you rarely get that type of insight, and I think the Switch itself, he mentions PlayStation, Nintendo, right? I think the Switch itself is, to your point, Travis, the exact example of you might have a Switch as well. We know that the Switch is a complementary console for a lot of people because of the games they put out. But I would also like to remind people, right? He's CEO of gaming for Microsoft, and he's coming from a global picture, right? I think one of the kind of hazards we entertain here where we sit in the US is that Xbox feels a lot more prevalent here, right? Because it's a US company, it's their biggest market share in terms of console to console. Whereas when you look at the picture globally, which Phil is obviously doing, this conversation is very different in a lot of markets. Recognizing that is important.
It's also interesting that the core gamers watching Kind of Funny, their solution as well, they won't sell their PS5s, but a lot of them will buy a second console. That's pretty rare. It's actually, there aren't a lot of multi-homers, Ains, out there.
Not multi-homers.
They're multi-homers. There aren't a lot of multi-homers out there. Most people, they're going to buy one game's console and that's it. Like that's all they're getting. The idea of buying a second one is because there's
we are not the majority.
We're not the majority. I don't think most people own more than one console. Most people don't even own one.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. They're not gamers. Then most own one. But
I
do think the stuff that I was reading in that CMA report had 23% as multi-homing between Microsoft and Sony. So I mean, it's not nothing.
It's not nothing. But he's probably looking at their biggest market, and their biggest market is probably people who just bought one. And if you're a casual gamer, especially, I cannot imagine you moving platforms at this point. I mean, you're locked in because that's where all of your it's just a tough sell. It's a tough sell.
Yeah, and I think people forget that, right? I know I talk about this a lot here, but people look at their own experiences. They love to say things like, "Yeah, but me and my friends do X," and it's like you and your friends are not a market. Phil Spencer's looking at this from a global picture percentage, and he has probably more data than any of us will ever see on how these things break down across, all kinds of divisions. So let me ask this other one that I kind of took note on, guys. So Witta asked a good question, I thought, which was awesome. Around.
Shout out to Witta. He crushed it on this interview, and he's just a really smart guy. I love seeing him. He should just
I love this quote about failure, which Phil commented on as well. And I love the question he asked Phil, which is around looking at Redfall post-mortem. And he basically said, now that you look at Redfall's launch and, everything we just talked about relating to Redfall, what is Xbox's process for a what would be considered a poor game release post-mortem? What do you go back to the teams and do? And how do you prepare to try to ensure that an instance like this doesn't happen again? And one of the things I found Phil's answer, I don't know about you guys, this is the one I found kind of strange, because he said that they need to get to their first party teams with help sooner, They have this kind of internal technology teams, right, that kind of help with development and getting games optimized and over the line, basically ready for release. He said that they needed to get the Arcane Austin sooner in this case, which one I want to touch on because I take issue with that. The other thing that really jumped out to me, and I think other people, is he said that this game was not as He said Starfield was not as far along as Redfall when they got a hold of it. And he was kind of alluding to the fact that Starfield's going to be in great shape for launch. He says that during the interview. But when you take his other statement, which he says Starfield was not as far along as Redfall when they got to it, I'm thinking to myself, Redfall just had a bad launch. It's very clear it needed more time.
I think the implication is that Microsoft's people can save it.
Yeah.
That Redfall was too far gone for them to fix, and that Starfield was a baby when they got it.
Right, but doesn't that counter what we've heard about Starfall over the past year, that it's been in development for 7 years and all these other things about Starfield? That seems to counter that.
But I think it was still early stages when they got to it because it's a Bethesda proper. Their games take like a decade, and I think Redfall was one of those games where
I like Redfield.
Starfall. Chris Redfield. No, I think Redfall was
Starfield. What did I say? Starfall. I'm sorry. I meant Starfield.
It's easiest thing to do here.
Yeah, Starfall. Those are both great games, by the way. I could totally see a game called Starfall.
Deathloop, Starfall. Yeah. Starfield, Redfall, Redloop, whatever.
I think that made sense to me because I think when they saw Starfield, they knew how big that game was going to be, and they probably put all their forces behind it. Redfall is probably one of those things where they found out about it later, like Hi-Fi Rush, and they were like, "Oh, great, we'll market it." It sounds like you guys already have a game that you're ready to go with, right? And so I think
the strange thing to me is that Redfall should have been Hi-Fi Rush. Redfall should have been a lower key Arcane joint that they put
marketed
out there
it too much,
and then I don't know why it got like the Kingpin type marketing. I don't know what was seen internally that got it to that Starfield level of you're one of the pillars of our not E3.
I think it's because they didn't have anything else.
That's just sad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's because Bethesda, right when Microsoft acquired them, they had just committed all their projects to be PlayStation exclusives for a year. You know what I mean? Like the Xbox inherited a really weird situation where they were publishing games on the PlayStation console for years after the acquisition, which is crazy.
Yeah, because Deathloop and Ghostwire are both more deserving of marketing push than Redfall.
But they can't market
now that we've seen them all.
Exclusive on PlayStation, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And they got to stop naming games as compound words, man.
They really do. Yeah, they really do. But yeah, I didn't have a problem with that statement. I think that he recognizes that they made a mistake in not flagging that down. I still don't know if a publisher could change anything about that game. They could maybe delay it and offer support and guidance and that sort of stuff. But I mean, just from what I've played of that game, if it was as far along as they say it is, I don't know if the tech would have helped it. It might have been more disruptive than helpful.
Right. There's fundamental design issues, right, is what we talked about. Yeah. So
I think the goal of that piece of the messaging, right, is that you can still be excited for Starfield. Redfall is not.
Well, of course.
Starfield.
I think that was
the point of that is they are different, and we were able to interact with them differently.
Agreed.
Whether that makes full sense or not, I don't know, but I think that's what he was trying to convey as part of that messaging, and that's fair.
Agreed.
But
it is fair, and he said, obviously, when you get your hands on it, right? Don't take my word for it. So he said, when you get your hands on it, you'll be able to tell us. So,
well, I think the thing of it is nobody's going to take your word for it, Phil. I mean, the biggest problem with the Xbox brand right now is that like they go out on Twitter this last week and say, well, we're excited to show you all these things in June. It's like, well, I remember last June, so I'm not with you. You haven't proven yourself yet, and I keep waiting. Everybody keeps waiting. It's like watching the Detroit Lions. It's always next year.
Yeah,
and
you lost Travis with that one, but yeah, I got you.
Well,
no, I know enough about sports to know Detroit Lions suck. So that's even commonplace knowledge.
Detroit Lions are coming.
So I
in the division next year. Come on.
Yeah.
That's where I was going to go with this next is. So we've talked on this show, and I know many of us have, around Xbox's seemingly inconsistent ability to manage their releases, right?
Yeah.
And that concerns us. Like they have very good game releases. We've pointed to those, and then all of a sudden, like they have a Redfall or they have something else that kind of launches, below expectations for what a first party kind of managed game should be. So I guess my question is to you guys is we've talked about this extensively before. We just had another instance in Redfall. At this point, I think it's fair to be jaded to the point of Xbox at this point has to prove that they can deliver consistent quality, at least to a certain level. We're not talking about 90 meta on every release, but at least to a certain quality of all of their first party releases. Maybe not all, but 95%, what have you. Yeah, maybe not all.
I don't think any publisher or platform owner is doing that. I think every console owner, I mean, this is my philosophy anyway, is guilty until proven innocent of making a good game, period. Like on a game-to-game basis. Like PlayStation has to prove to me that they can make a good game every time they come out with a game. Same with Nintendo. Sure. I don't assume it based on the brand, and I think that's the smart way to do it, because all of these guys have put up bad games. I mean, how far away are we from I think Forspoken?
Travis, I'm not saying that you buy the game, but Forspoken wasn't made by Sony. I mean, that's one of the weird things.
First party.
Square Enix is Square Enix. Never they promote Square Enix, folks.
Right. And what I was going to say is, like,
they make so many good games lately.
They do.
I was getting to that. Stop it. I was getting to that point though, Travis, is do you think, I guess my question to you guys is, do you think that PlayStation and Nintendo for that matter have earned the right, because of a more consistent first party delivery, to have that bad game once in a while, and we as a community of gamers, what have you, are more critical of Xbox because it seems like it happens more often? Do you feel that's like a fallacy and that's just something, or do you think that that's a reality?
I mean, it's all vibe. Yeah, it's all perception. I think that I definitely wouldn't argue with anybody who says that Xbox has a quality problem and that they're worried that they trust those games less. I definitely wouldn't. It's just not the way I view the world. I kind of see it as like, how much do I trust? For me, how much I trust the development studio matters a lot more.
Well, to me, Travis, I think the distinction that I have with what you're saying is that I'm not looking at it at the point of buying. I agree with you entirely there. Okay, let's see how the game actually reviews, or whether or not it has something I'm not expecting. But what I want to know from these talks and social media and existing in the world is, what can I be excited about? What can I hype? What can I feel like is probably going to be good? And that's a lot closer in truth to the Nintendo and Sony releases than it is the Xbox ones right now. I have no faith in Starfield because that's where Xbox sits in my head right this second. And on the Sony side of things,
Bethesda. Well, see, that's the way I think of it. I think of it as like, I trust Bethesda studio, and it has nothing to do with Microsoft. You know what I mean?
Well, with the disclaimer that my brother works at ZeniMax, I don't trust Bethesda at all. But that's a distinction, right? So, like, yes, Xbox is trying to keep Bethesda kind of independent and running itself, but I think Phil has always done this kind of soft-handed approach. And at some point, either that changes or new management comes in if this is the result of that approach. So I like some of the things he said in that kind of funny interview about we want creatives to explore their creativity and things like that. But I think you do have to check in. You do have to have publishers saying, is this going in a direction where we can continue to fund it? Is there anything we need to worry about? At least until people are on the right track and doing what you want them to do with their studios and getting products out on a reasonable time frame and at a high enough kind of review score quality level.
Yeah. By the way, another thing that I found really interesting from that interview was the fact that they hired an internal review to be done by Hit Detection. For those of you who don't know, Hit Detection is one of the largest internal review companies. So they will come in and review your game before it's out, and then it's filled with a bunch of industry veterans who used to write reviews for outlets like IGN.
Mock reviews are awesome. I mean, it's a really interesting thing to read up about, because one of my favorite video game reviewers of all time, Tom Chick, does mock reviews now.
Yeah, a lot of them do. There's also been some people who were canceled who do mock reviews because their names can't be on public facing websites. So if I ever get canceled, Hit Detection, hit me up. What up? So
I like how you say that like you're not going to be canceled someday, Travis.
I know.
It's really more of a when.
Yeah, it's really a matter of when.
There's but didn't he say that the mock reviews were scoring
double-digit
far higher?
That's the thing I want to get to, is that is very surprising to me, because mock reviews are done by people who have been review games for years, and I think Hit Detection cherry picks the ones that either tend to rank lower in a lot of the reviews, which, you know, I would be a good recruit for that, or people that kind of end up in the middle, which is, you know, it kind of makes sense. And it surprises me that they were so off, because my mock review, I mean, based on the 15, 16 hours I played, would have been like a 4 out of 10. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't have been close to what they thought it was going to be, because that means that they were getting 70s to
75s.
80s. Yeah, 7 to 8. Yeah,
8s. Yeah.
It also surprises me that if they were getting 7s in the mock reviews, that they would put so much marketing behind it. That really surprises me, because I think that's part of why people feel betrayed by this one, is Microsoft really put a lot of emphasis behind it. And then the fact that they, had an IGN exclusive, IGN first coverage where they marketed it at 60 frames per second on PC and didn't talk about how it wasn't going to hit that on console. And he talked about that being a mistake on their part in the interview. But it just surprises me, all the misses on this one. And I'm very surprised that the mock review was so off. It's really surprising.
Well, and you have to take that as sincere, right? I mean, like, that's one of the questions. Like, it doesn't strike me as a game that would have reviewed a lot higher than it did. So it doesn't feel like the overall review landscape is that far off. And mock reviewers, as far as I know, I'm not a mock reviewer, folks, but they seem to be more slanted towards negativity. Like, these are designed to be things that have you improve your game, or otherwise address issues before they happen. And so it is a surprise. And I do think you have management questions, right? Because that marketing push sets expectations, rightly or wrongly. Redfall becomes a game that is, you know, in the Starfield and God of War Ragnarok conversation, when it belongs in the, I don't know, Ghostwire kind of conversation.
Yeah, probably more along the lines of Ghostwire, I would say. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? Because I sit here and I think to myself, we're talking. We've had this conversation before too, but we're talking about Phil Spencer ran Xbox first party at one point in time back when it was Microsoft Game Studios, right? And you've got a whole host of levels of leadership under him that play games, understand games. I mean, obviously, there's a massive amount of people within the Xbox company division, I should say, that play, love games, etc., and understand what makes a good game, what doesn't make a good game, etc. So I guess what's weird to me is that nobody kind of could see this coming, and we've had this conversation, like, how does a game like that get released and they honestly think that's going to be an 8 Metacritic game? And everyone from the people at Arcane leadership, Arcane Austin, to the people above them that may be playing it, to the builds, right? There had to be reviews of builds months prior where people could have pointed out core aspects that we've mentioned about this game that didn't look like they were fully fleshed out. I continue to not understand how that happens.
Me neither.
Unless it's anything beyond to Hoeg's point, we've invested this much time and money. This game has to ship. It's got to get out the door. It is what it is. But
I don't think it was that, though.
I think Xbox has shown a certain amount of dysfunction here from the Halo release to now.
I've said he goes back to Halo, and I think. But
look, Halo was clearly. Travis, I'm not talking about Halo Infinite as a game as it came out. I'm talking about the initial showing.
Yeah.
And then they come out that week and say we had no idea that people would react this negatively to it. I mean, like, there's a blind spot on their internal review process.
That's exactly my point. Is how does that continue to happen, and what's the post-mortem on that? You know what I mean? Like, I want to hear. I don't need to hear specifics. I'm just a gamer.
Yes men involved. That's usually how that shows in a company.
That could be.
I don't know. I don't know the dynamics. This is me talking out of school. I'm not in the room. I've never met any of these people. But
I'll do it. Hire me. I'll tell you your game is bad.
Travis will.
I will.
Travis will tell you your favorite family member sucks if that's what you need.
I will do that. Yeah, I've been kicked out of more rooms for stating my deeply held beliefs than anyone I know. I'm like Larry David. I'm prolific. I get asked to leave places all the time. Yeah, it's true.
By the way, shout out, we hit 500 concurrent viewers between the two streams. Thank you very much. Very cool. So where do they go from here? I mean, obviously you've got the showcase in pretty much a month, just over a month as we record this. We know we've got the Starfield Direct there with the Starfield release happening in September, which I think we all agree. I don't agree that Starfield is make or break for Xbox, but it is critical. I mean, this is the biggest game that they're going to release in a big time frame, probably since Halo, I would say. There's going to be, especially after these conversations, there's going to be a lot of focus on that game and how it performs. And
well, that June Starfield Direct is important. But I mean,
very.
I think the answer to your question is, and it's sad for everybody, is that it's a slow road from here. This is a reputational issue. This isn't anything else.
Agreed.
So everything they show us as marketing is much discounted in worth, if not worthless, because it doesn't matter until you're playing a game, as Phil says in that interview. Even if Starfield looks fantastic, it's like, well, you can do a lot of stuff with trailers and marketing. We're going to have to wait until it comes out. But I don't know that it'll look fantastic because I was not impressed from the last time it was shown.
I went back and watched the Redfall launch trailer after I beat the game. Holy crap. What the, like, there's such a gap in what is shown in that launch trailer between what you actually got. So I don't know. I think that I think this June showcase obviously has to hit. I think we need to understand where their game releases are, kind of what's upcoming beyond Forza and Starfield. But I don't know, man. I think that it does feel kind of strange to be in a place where you have a big game releasing. Like, I guess the example I could give is God of War Ragnarok, huge game for PlayStation, right? But leading up to that release, it didn't feel like we were sitting on pins and needles, like, oh God, I wonder how this game's going to perform. You know what I mean? No, it just feels like the next big PlayStation God of War game's coming. Whereas Starfield, it feels, at least as I always say anecdotally, it feels like we're all like a little bit nervous of like, is this game going to really kind of deliver what Bethesda and Xbox say it's
more
going to?
ambitious in its scope, right? I mean, Ragnarok really is God of War again.
Yeah.
No, but I just mean I was just using a big budget AAA first party kind of example.
I mean, I feel
or Zelda. Take Zelda. Is anyone sitting on pins and needles doubting that Zelda's going to hit right now?
Kinda.
Because,
no, you're not.
They're worried about performance. A lot of people are.
It's a Switch. Everyone's worried about performance. I'm talking about the game.
It's not going to perform well. I'm no longer worried.
People are like, "How is it going to run?" Yeah, but I can't talk about it anyway.
He knows too much.
I cannot state.
Let me ask this: does anyone doubt that Zelda is going to be a 90+ meta game? Nobody doubts that.
Well, I don't know what it's going to score, but I do know that Nintendo can't afford to like blow up the Zelda brand. So I think there's a certain amount of trust that they're not idiots.
Yeah.
Wouldn't the same be said of Starfield?
I would love to say the same about Xbox, but they've lost that kind of.
No, but that's that's the point I'm making. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's Bethesda.
It's Xbox first party, whether you like it or not. They're part of Xbox's first party.
They have different cultures. They have different development teams.
Absolutely.
I think it matters. Yeah,
it does.
I think, at least this is just my memory of this, I remember everybody being nervous about every Bethesda game that's ever come out. I remember Skyrim. People were like, "Are they going to ruin Are they going to ruin Oblivion?" And I remember when Oblivion was coming out, they were like, "Are they going to ruin Morrowind?" That's just my recollection. Is like,
and they ruined them
was
both.
super nervous.
Ooh,
but you don't like either of those games, huh?
No, I do. But I mean, Oblivion is a dumbed down version of everything Elder Scrolls was before that, and
that's very true.
And Skyrim is okay. Certainly on release, Skyrim was a lot worse than it was, and it never ran on PlayStation ever.
Skyrim is okay.
Skyrim did have major issues at launch on PlayStation. He's not lying there. It was broken.
That's what I'm saying. So I think people are like holding it to a standard.
It's a famous example of releasing broken games. Like it's one of the companies that's known for that.
That's my point. So I remember everybody being worried about that for all their other games, and they were right. By the way, Fallout 4, same exact thing. I remember people being like, "Is this game going to suck?"
Starfield is very likely to be broken. You're very likely to be broken. Compilation videos of people spinning heads around and becoming ant monsters or whatever else happens in this game. And
having a bus for a head. Remember that? Remember the bus for a head?
A bus for a head. I don't remember that.
Oh, that was actually intentional. So the way that Fallout 3, you remember how you could get on the subway trains and then it would move? The way that they did that is they put a model of a character below the level, and then they put a hat on that was the train on the person's head. And so you're actually stepping into somebody's head mechanically when you do it.
That's cool.
And yeah, it's insane.
I love stories like that. Like I love how
Yeah.
game development
Games
happens.
have a
It's
lot
so
of
cool.
like that magic trick
Yeah.
type stuff. Once the
Well,
engine-
like in Days Gone, did you know that Unreal Engine didn't support bikes, so they had to take a car and fold it in half?
no.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
when they built Days Gone, those
I
stories
didn't
are
know that.
awesome, dude. I love that.
Days
By the
Gone
way,
is
shout out to
really
Kurt over on Hoeg's channel on Civil Law in the House.
Do you expect a seamless transition from planet to space? I think they've already said they're not doing that.
Yeah. I don't think they're trying to go the No Man's Sky route, which I actually think is fine because you play Jedi Survivor, they don't have that either. There's like very obvious loading screens that are super clunky, but it's fine. If you like, to me, that's not really part of the fantasy, is like being in the void of space. The void of space is famously not a lot going on.
That's why it's the void.
That's why it's the void. Yeah, it's literally a vacuum.
Space is big, as Douglas said.
Exactly. So I actually think that if they can nail having a bunch of memorable locations and sticking to what they know, that could be successful. Or they could blow us out of the water with some new stuff we never thought that they would even try. It's Bethesda, so it's a 50-50 coin toss, honestly, on them just sticking to their guns or doing something totally new and weird. Interested to see. I'm not worried about that game though, personally. I know it's going to be buggy. I know it's going to be a Bethesda release.
It's not going to run great. It's not going to be a showpiece.
But none of that's going to matter. It's going to be like, Minecraft. Like people are just going to be sharing crazy.
That game will just get better and better and better over time. Yeah.
It's just going to be one of those games. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. And that wasn't necessarily my point about comparing to God of War, because they are, vastly different targets, right, for what those experiences are going to be over time. But my point was merely that it feels like, not because it's just Bethesda and not because it's Starfield, but just in general, when there's a major Xbox first party release, feels like we kind of sit on pins and needles because of the unsure nature of what we can expect. I don't think there's a level of confidence that it's just going to hit it out of the park.
No,
that was the point I was making. Is all. Like, again, it's a known.
With Halo. They lost my trust with Halo because it was just the kind of game, you've heard me say it here before, that is on your box as you sell your Series X, and it doesn't hit launch for any reason is almost unacceptable. But the way that it happened, I just thought was indicative of real dysfunction at internal studios.
Agreed.
I think every studio is facing these problems. Honestly, I talked about this. I don't think it was on this show, but a different show recently, about how every developer I talk to is like work from home. It sucks. It's hard.
We talked about it last week, Travis, me and you.
There you go. Yeah. That's I honestly think that's a big part of it. And I think it's definitely part of it for Halo, since that was like peak COVID, remote work, all that stuff. It's hard to do QA remotely.
I hear you.
I agree.
The studios are going to have to figure it out, because
I'm
telling you that the worker class is not going back into the office as often as they want them to.
Yep, I think so, and I think that's
100%.
I think they will if they're mission driven. Like, I've talked to developers who are like, yeah, we want to go back in the office because we want this game to be good.
But
and
who are you talking to? Are you talking to like the lead? You talking to the president? Or are you talking to the person that's making art?
I was talking to just a regular cog in the wheel developer, and that person was told to go back into the office and was stoked about it because he was sick of working remotely because nothing got done and he wanted to make a good game. And he said that that's not even uncommon in his office. He's like, there's a lot of us that just like are champing at the bit to like go back. And so I think that if you are mission driven and you really are in games development because you just, that's how you get your jollies is making video games, then I think, those people will probably be willing to go back in the office. And I think for some of them, they need it. Some of them, not all of them.
I'm not even disagreeing with the fact that some of them that may need it, maybe the ones that don't want to go. But I do think that you're getting a lot of pushback across all sorts of industries, including video games.
Yeah, you will. And I don't think people are going to go back, and there needs to be a remote solution. Obviously, the advantages that the worker gets are undeniable. But I think that when you're working on something as team-oriented and communication important as making a creative video game project, there's going to be a certain amount of in-person collaboration that's you'll probably benefit from it, right? And at the very least, these companies are having a hard time adjusting. That's just what I'm hearing from people that work on games.
Sure.
And so I think and actually Phil talks about it in the interview. He talks about the remote work situation in COVID, well, just a little bit. It's kind of a footnote, but I actually think that that's a bigger problem than people are willing to admit. And if you look at the games that have come out in the last couple of years, people are going, why are all these games broken? To me, it's pretty obvious. Remote work, like I can't imagine making a game remotely, dude. Have you ever tried to organize something via text group chat? It's nearly impossible. You know what I mean? Like it making a game remotely sounds like hell. So to me, it's not a surprise that like all these, like even Jedi Survivor, as good of a game it is. I mean, I'm not surprised by the QA problems. I think that stuff is just easier to slip through the cracks when you're not physically together, looking at it together, collaborating. It's just hard.
Yeah,
I agree.
Shout out to I think we hit like 520 concurrent. By the way, we're co-streaming on both channels, of course. Please check out both or click on both. Always appreciate that support on both sides of the house here. Well, guys, we've talked about Xbox for a while. Anything else you wanted to mention specifically about the Kind of Funny interview or anything relating to Phil Spencer or Xbox? And one question for you.
I think the only thing I would add is that I think we're still well away from the apocalypse. I think people like to doomsay on these kinds of things. And I think that Phil being transparent and or maybe a little negative is not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that Xbox doesn't potentially change management, which may or may not include as high level as Phil, but like there are things to address in project management and organizational institutions that have these kinds of issues. But it's far too early to just sign off on Xbox or the Microsoft project, I would say.
Yep.
Agreed.
You just don't trust companies in general. My suggestion.
Let me ask you guys this. Starfield, will it launch on Xbox with a 60 FPS mode?
No.
Place your bets.
0.
We got 2 hard no's.
Chance. Yeah.
I say no as well. That's 3 no's, chat. Hold us accountable. Hold us accountable.
I'd love to say
if they do and it runs at 720p, more power to them. I think some people would really like that. My vote is no. And by the way, if you are expecting Starfield to run at 60 FPS, I dare say you have never played a Bethesda game. I honestly, seriously, I mean, just look at all their games on console. There's no precedent for it. That's not the type of game they make. It's also not really their ambition, and I would be disappointed if their ambition was to run at 60 FPS and cut out all the other stuff that they want to do that would make 60 FPS impossible.
Fair. Yeah. So you got 3 no's here. Creed in the chat probably asked the more relevant question, which is, will it have a stable 30 FPS?
Will it have a stable anything? I mean, will the frame rate be stable? Will the skill tree be stable? Will the game itself be stable enough to not crash? I have no idea. People are really forgetting. I know Skyrim is real old, but like it broke down a lot.
Fallout 4 too. That's more recent. Same thing.
I always forget Fallout 4 exists. I was so bored by that.
And that's obviously Fallout 76 is a different instance, right? A different target, but still, I mean, it is another example.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, yeah. All right. So we'll move on from that specific thing, but I did want to ask Hoeg because last week, Travis and I were left to our own devices as Dan took off. And Travis represented for you as best he could on the CMA conversation around the ABK acquisition from Microsoft and Xbox. I wanted to revisit that with you here, Hoeg, just to see if there's anything, what you wanted to say about it, and if I don't know if you had a chance to listen or watch.
I have to be honest, I didn't watch Travis's summary, so I'm very sorry. I assume it was very astute.
He prepared heavily for you too. He'll be disappointed.
Yeah. I'm disappointed.
I will watch
as well. Yeah,
he did quite good. I gotta say, he did quite good in my opinion.
But
I think I gave my opinion before I had finished reading the entire thing. But I'd read, the pertinent stuff to write about it, and now I have read the entire document. So go away, and I'll tell you where you're wrong, Hoeg.
Oh, sorry. Before you do that, Hoeg, I got 2 super chats related to what we were just talking about. It'd be better to get to now. So Gecko Gamer says €6 super chat says that interview with Phil has to be one of the few times where Phil actually answers the questions that he was asked.
I don't think that's fair. I think he's a pretty good interviewer. He's pretty honest.
I think he's pretty transparent. He does sometimes put on the corporate face, right? But
that's the job.
Look at where he is in a position. That's his job. I mean,
I think I've interviewed people who have refused to give me answers many times, many times, and I think you could do a lot worse than Phil. It's just my experience.
Agree. And I think people also, because of how kind of down to earth Phil feels, right? And he talks about gaming and he's very open and transparent. People forget how high up Phil is. Like, I think they forget that he's on the inner table at Microsoft and he's one of the executives, the CEOs of a division of Microsoft. Like, he is one of the highest executives kind of in the land, if you will.
He's heir apparent to the Microsoft Corporation.
So
if
I
Nadella
mean,
doesn't work out, it's all Phil all the day. I'm just joking. It's not true.
yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. But yeah, so I don't know, Gecko. But thank you for the super chat. Appreciate you. And then Amin, with the Polish, what do we say? Not Zatka. I forget what we said this is.
You nailed it. Got it in one.
Yeah. All right. I have a lot of friends that play only third-party games. Some of them play only FIFA, and they buy PlayStation. Yeah, and that
Pretty
speaks
common.
to region. That speaks to the global kind of market conversation we were talking about, right? And I think that's exactly the case. There's a lot more casual gamers than there are the people like us sitting here on this panel that own and play everything. I mean, that's just a fact. So
True.
Yeah. Thank you for the super chats, guys. Sorry, Hoeg. Let's move to the CMA. I just didn't want to miss those.
No, it's okay. The CMA, I mean, like I said, I don't know what Travis said earlier or last week, but
whole lot of nonsense.
I mean, the actual report, despite being 400 pages long, is more an indication of people trying to prove that they know something with length of words and billable time than anything else. So if you read the CMA report, you will see writ large all of the logical fallacies and problems that they have with what they're describing as a nascent market that not only hasn't been proven, but doesn't stand for itself economically at all, which is cloud gaming. And then they have the temerity as part of that report to effectively combine the notion of Game Pass, which is a multi-game subscription service that has a cloud gaming feature, and say that it represents a cloud gaming market entry. I mean, the entirety of the report spins back around on itself so that you're essentially bleary-eyed, if not cross-eyed, by the time you get to the end. But the CMA doesn't have a logical leg to stand on. That doesn't mean that they won't ultimately win in the UK, which is a different jurisdiction than ours in the United States, of course, and that the Competition Appeals Tribunal doesn't really have to look at the merits of what the CMA's logic was, is helpful for them because they're an executive branch type agency that just gets to do what they want in the UK. But I would describe, if I ever get to make this video, which I've been kind of backburnering and working on in between legal things for the last week or so, one of the things that I would describe it as is it's motivated reasoning throughout, right? And motivated reasoning is a very specific kind of concept that is the notion that you come to your conclusion first and then you backstop to fill in how you arrived at that conclusion with what has been given to you as evidence and things like that. So the CMA is wildly incorrect as to its description of the video game industry and how it's chosen to do things. But I think even it knows that. It decided it wanted to block the deal. It was going to block the deal on console gaming, and its math was so wildly off that they had to pull that out, and they never really even changed their report to cover for the fact that that wasn't something that they were looking at in the final report. So it's...
Well, they came to a conclusion in console and decided that it didn't make sense to block it on the
they were
basis
forced to change their math because their math was so wrong, and then they said it doesn't count. But half of that report, if you look at that 418 pages, you said you read it all, half of that report is describing the console gaming setup and then taking some of the logic from it and trying to apply it to cloud gaming in a very clunky way. More clunky than the last case of Benedict Fox, honestly. And you can see, in my opinion, that the format of that whole report was that we were going to hold that we're blocking it on console gaming, if not both. And then that went away because they had to. I mean, once that math came out, they had to pull back on that. But they'd already decided. So it comes across as a very motivated document the whole time. And that's ultimately what I will probably say in virtual legality if I ever wind up scripting the thing properly, because that's what I have to do for process now a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I think Travis, you kind of aligned with that last week. They came to a conclusion and kind of backed into it. We talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, my read on it was less kind of non-trusting of the CMA and whatever reasoning they might have had. I took issue with their conclusion on cloud gaming, as I think anybody who has an understanding of that 1 to 2% of the gaming market would.
But I don't think it's real. right?
It's a ridiculous argument, but here's where I stand, Hoeg. And this was my takeaway, my galaxy brain theory of what was going on with that. If I'm being charitable to the CMA, and we always try to be charitable to people we're arguing against, right? Is that I think that some of the stuff that's redacted, where they talk about the internal plans that they got to see, the business plans for Microsoft, included some cloud gaming stuff, and the fact that they have advantages that Nintendo and Sony could never have because they have access to one of the big three cloud infrastructures.
Yeah, but then they use the Google evidence exactly the opposite of the way they should use it.
Exactly.
They use Google to suggest that Call of Duty is the thing that matters when Google has more advantages than Microsoft does. I mean, like it's a crazy document.
My problem with the conclusion they came to on cloud is that they made a regulation based on speculation, which typically you don't do that. You base it off of the current market as it exists, and then if a monopoly is formed, then you go through a process to break it up, right? But they basically just said, we think that the market's going to look like this in the future, and we think that if Microsoft has Call of Duty and World of Warcraft, and they have this cloud advantage that Nintendo and Sony don't, that they could, foreclose those businesses just by having this crazy model. And I think that they saw something in Microsoft's business plan that included a future for cloud gaming that had some aggressive strategy. That's just me, if I'm being charitable to them, is that the stuff that we didn't see that they're worried about, even if they did, though, it's still speculative regulation. And I'm uncomfortable with that on premise. I don't think that agencies typically are supposed to be legislating, which is what it feels like if you're making a prediction and then making a decision based on that. And so that's my problem with it. But all the other parts of the report where they talk about console gaming market, I thought it was well reasoned in the conclusion that they came to, and the arguments that they were making, the fact that they straight up said that they thought Sony was wrong about the Call of Duty foreclosure strategy, I thought was a fair analysis of that situation, regardless of what reasoning they may have had to do it.
Well, that's the math. That was when they changed it a month ago.
Yeah. And I didn't read that past report, so I was just looking at their final conclusion and going, that makes sense to me. Like, I think that the
problem is still that the original sin lives there, right? Because they disagree that it made monetary sense for Microsoft to do it, but they don't disagree that they could have, right? So there's two parts of this in the CMA report, and it's could Microsoft foreclose its competitors, Sony, Nintendo, whomever, by keeping Call of Duty exclusive to their console ecosystem, and then would they? And then ultimately what the CMA finds is that that they could foreclose Sony or Nintendo or whomever with keeping Call of Duty, and then they could foreclose a competitor in the cloud gaming space by keeping Call of Duty, and then would they is where they differ, right? They won't on console because they make too much money on PlayStation, but they would on cloud because it doesn't make any money anywhere. And the CMA hand waves a little bit and says, but it would have in the future because Activision definitely would have brought Call of Duty to the cloud. And you're like, sure, CMA, whatevs.
Yeah, exactly. How would they have done that? They don't have a cloud.
But that original sin is that you can keep one game off of a platform of any kind, whether it's a PlayStation or in GeForce Now or whatever, and that would cripple it and kill it from the marketplace. And I don't think that logic holds one bit on any platform. But then you put it in a market that doesn't exist, that is a substitute for
that to me is the big problem, is the market that doesn't exist, and the fact that they use that to block the deal. Because I actually thought the report elsewhere was pretty credible. Like it seemed to me like
that report was built to block it on console basis. It was.
Yeah. Or they didn't draw that conclusion. But the cloud argument to me is crazy and kind of a dangerous decision as in terms of precedent for like the reasons you block things is based on what you think might happen. It strikes me as fairly anti-capitalist, specifically anti-entrepreneurial, because if you have an idea of what that market's going to be like, you're sort of closing a lot of doors to potential for disruptors, and you don't know what's going to happen,
right? I mean, like, what is the natural conclusion if you're Microsoft and Xbox? Well, if we would never put an xCloud button on the Game Pass, we would have been fine. I mean, like, isn't the incentive then don't add features to your stuff because you're inventing a market? That's not the way you want digital enterprise to work.
Right.
Exactly. It's going to inhibit people trying to carve out new markets because they'll be claimed, let's like you invent the first social media platform and all of a sudden they're like, no, you can't do that because then you would have a monopoly on that market that doesn't exist today. It's just like if you apply it to any other industry, you see how ridiculous of an idea it is. And I think gamers probably look at that, even the ones who believe the deal should be blocked, and probably have a lot of questions because who the heck has played cloud gaming? I've worked in the industry for 15 years and I've played cloud gaming like one time, and I think it was at E3 showcase. Like, it's just not.
I use it the way Microsoft accuses me of using it, which is that I use it for Game Pass games I'm not sure of to play for 5 minutes, and then I download the Game Pass game.
How do you play it? You play it on your phone for 5 minutes or what?
No, you can just you play it on your Xbox.
You can do it on your console
now.
Now.
Picture of the cloud.
Yeah, you can just play it directly without downloading it, and then if you like it, you download it and play it locally.
That's what I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's just because it's faster for you to do that than download. See, I'm spoiled because it's faster for me to just download the game. So yeah.
Well, it can't be faster for you to download the game, but it's a negligible difference.
Yeah, it takes like 30 seconds.
I get you.
It's not
Yeah, I'm not downloading video games in 30 seconds. Sorry.
Yeah, so that makes more sense. Okay, yeah. So maybe my use case is just very limited.
So what's the next step here? I've seen a lot of speculation around where Microsoft goes from here and appeals and all that stuff. So can either of you speak specifically to that?
Sure. Well, there's definitely going to be an appeal to the Competition Appeals Tribunal, the CAT. And the difficulty that Microsoft faces there is that the standard of review on that process in the United Kingdom is what they call judicial review. And it's what would be the equivalent to here in America of a rational basis test, where the court has to accept what the executive agency did as long as there was any rational basis. Not that they argued a rational basis necessarily in their document or otherwise, but that one could imagine a rational person coming to the conclusion they did. And so that's a very difficult thing to reach. But one of the reasons I framed it as motivated is that the tribunal is supposed to be allowed to look at whether or not an executive agency came in with a biased conclusion first and then did what I'm accusing them of doing, which is make the document work for what they had already decided to do. So It is possible that Microsoft could win at that appeals level. The problem is that for the most part, the appeals tribunal isn't a kind of body that is capable of making the decision on its own. So for the most part, they send it back to the CMA and say, try again. Which is a long-term process. I mean, you're talking about another year.
That's what I was going to say. That doesn't sound short. Yeah.
So do you think that Xbox or Microsoft's move is to proceed with FTC and EU and see if they can get approvals in those regions? And then if they do, it puts a lot more pressure on the CMA to evaluate and reconsider their position?
Well, the question is whether the CMA feels any pressure. I mean, they're a political body, so do they care what the EU does? Do they care what America does? But certainly the FTC and the CMA are kind of backstopping each other because the FTC's arguments aren't much better than the CMA's. And the EU's ultimate decision here, which is coming very soon, is going to put Microsoft in a specific light. If the EU goes with them, at that point you've got an FTC trial that's supposed to start in August and the CMA trying to block you, then yeah, Microsoft might be able to pressure the CMA against the FTC or the FTC against the CMA. But all of that is kind of speculative about how the politics operate. And that's in the room. That's personalities. That's knowing who you're sitting across the table from. And I can't guess at that from here. But I will say that the chances of the deal going through took a substantial hit when the CMA decided to try to block. And I never would have anticipated, I didn't anticipate that they would go straight to block. I mean, there's multiple levels of things that you can do here. We've talked about behavioral remedies. We've talked about structural remedies and blocking. And the CMA's argument was already weak. And I thought that they would go for potentially a structural remedy and try to shore off Activision or something from the deal. But blocking, I think, took everybody by surprise. That's why you see the stock market move very rapidly when that happens.
It's a nuclear option, right?
Yeah, I mean, and then they have a whole set of pages where they try to explain why it's proportionate to what the risks are facing this deal, and it doesn't make any sense at all, because the CMA is supposed to take the narrowest choice to still get to a place where they're okay with the level of competition in the marketplace, and blocking is huge. And their press release is a little bit crazy because they have a whole paragraph that talks about how if they didn't block it, they'd have to regulate it. And it sounds like I don't know the UK politics well enough, but it sounds like they're talking to kind of a conservative government that doesn't want to regulate things, doesn't want the companies to be overly beholden to an entity like the CMA, and the CMA tries to say, well, blocking is better because then we don't have to regulate it. And it's like, that's crazy. So, well, if we didn't murder this guy, we'd have to keep him in jail. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true, but it's not very useful to thinking about the regulatory environment in the UK or elsewhere. So, I mean, I think there are a lot of good arguments to be had, but I don't hold out any specific chance of success on that because the tribunal is so locked into a very high standard of review, and I'm not sure what Microsoft's internal appetite for going through this process at this level actually is.
Yeah. I see. I'm of the opinion that if the EU did go in Microsoft's favor, that it would put enormous pressure on the CMA, because I still think that agency and UK independence in general is sort of in a little bit of a precarious situation. And I think that they would feel pressure if the EU went that way. I honestly think
possible.
That. Yeah.
It's possible. I mean, it's literally a political question. I don't know exactly why there would be pressure on a British agency from what Europe does, other than, I guess, from the people. But Microsoft doesn't have a realistic threat of pulling entirely out of the United Kingdom. I know that they've kind of hinted at that, as has Activision. But for the most part, the UK could say you don't get to leave unless you're leaving entirely. And then enterprise is too valuable in the United Kingdom for them to do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think that its agency is still unproven, and I think the way that they do business when interacting with the EU is already kind of in a precarious situation, and this would be yet another kind of cut to the to that whole working relationship. I just don't see that going well for them.
Well, I don't think the CMA would independently just back off, but I mean, it's possible that they could get pressure from prime ministers and things like that.
I think so. We'll see, though. I kind of think that the CMA's decision, and I think the reason they drew first blood and blocked it when they did, is because they think it'll make the EU emboldened enough to side with them. And I think if that happens, it'll probably be the final blow for this deal ever happening. We'll see.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing to that for me is that my entire career, the EU has been the one that has been the toughest hurdle to overcome for big deals.
Right.
Yep.
And so relying on the EU to be the ones that say, no, it's okay, is an interesting position for Microsoft to be in, because that's not what they would have guessed that they would be in a year ago.
Right.
And so I just don't hold to trusting in that. And certainly the timing, you say that they drew first blood, but the timing is statutorily implied. And that's what Microsoft kind of asked for by putting the documents to the UK first and then submitting them to the EU, I think in November last year. So, I mean, Microsoft asked for this timing sequence, and this is how it turned out.
It as the acquisition turns, it continues to
I'm so exhausted by talking about this, by the way. I do not want to talk about it for another year.
I know it's I think many of us.
I can't. I mean, it's so difficult to get through in like a video format or virtual legality. People have been asking me for it now a lot in my social media and in my DMs, and I want to do it, but it's very difficult for me to make these videos the way I used to. And so we have to come up with a new strategy for making something as complicated as summarizing a 400-page document.
Well, we've done a pretty good job here, I think, for now. So we'll see what comes next.
I'll just bring you guys on and host virtual legality with me.
There you go. Done. Well, yeah, we'll continue to keep that up to date. As we always say, we don't like to talk about it every week, but when there are meaningful things like the CMA's decision, we'll obviously revisit and kind of comment on those. So the only other thing I wanted to mention this week, guys, is around PlayStation shutting down PixelOpus, which is one of their small studios. If I've got my numbers correct, it was like 20 to 30 employees total, I believe, a pretty small first-party studio that created Concrete Genie. They had been working on their new project for a few years, it seems. That is now canceled. And obviously this follows the cancellation of Dreams as well, the kind of internal kind of, player-driven game development studio that Media Molecule set forth. So PlayStation's obviously kind of going through their own little cleanup, if you will, of internal resources, which many companies are doing across industries right now. But Travis, I know you mentioned, that this one hit a little closer to home because you know some people at PixelOpus. Anything you want to kind of comment on this piece?
Yeah. So I actually tried to write a story about this, but I couldn't get my sources to go on the record just because they didn't want to talk about it. But I can tell you guys about it. There's nothing wrong with that. So I have two friends that are leaders at that studio. They headed up the art department, and they've worked there for 10 years. And they are part of my tabletop RPG group. They're great ladies.
Oh man,
they're really cool people. And they both lost their jobs. Obviously, they're not really sure what's going to happen in the future. But they told me that the reason the studio fell apart is because a bunch of the leadership left. I think it's just part of Great Resignation and people switching jobs and all that stuff. And Sony looked at the studio and just decided it wanted to, quote, focus more on larger projects. And so they didn't want to make small games. Which is sort of what that studio does. We need more
third-person, over-the-shoulder, open-world adventure games, Tony.
And it sounds like some of the people on that team are going to be going to work on said large third-person, over-the-shoulder games.
Yeah,
and so it's really disappointing to me because this is exactly the sort of thing you hope doesn't happen when a small studio gets acquired by a larger one, right? Or when a first-party studio starts that is designed to be smaller, right? You don't want the Psychonauts devs to get acquired by Microsoft and then go work on Halo, right?
Yeah, you don't want Double Fine working on Halo. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there were jokes about that when Double Fine got acquired, and I think obviously PlayStation has owned the studio for a while, and they've certainly let them create, but it's very disappointing to see this sort of thing happen. And I really doubt that my friends, even if they are offered other positions elsewhere at Sony, are going to stay, because I don't think that those are the types of games that they like to make. And so hopefully these people will start their own studio. I'm not really sure what's going to happen yet, but it was definitely sad to figure this out. And I first heard about it like everybody else, I just saw the tweet and I reached out to them and was like, yo, what the heck's going on? And they were like, yeah, we found out today too. Like, it's just sort of something's happening. So, yeah, this one hurt for sure. And I wish all the people at that studio the best if they end up staying in the Sony umbrella or if they end up going their own way. But yeah, we thank you for your service and your great games. And Concrete Genie is super underrated. If you haven't played it yet, the people that I'm referring to that play with me in tabletop RPGs, they did all of the art and were the art leads for Concrete Genie, which is an underrated game, I think.
It's a fun game. Am I right in thinking they did Entwined too?
They did.
Yes,
in 2014. I looked that up the other day. Yeah, and obviously we don't know what their upcoming project was because Concrete Genie came out in 2018, 19, something like that. It's a few years ago now. So they were apparently working on a new project, but we don't know what that was, which is a shame. So, yeah. So as we kind of wrote on the site and Travis just said, just echo, wish everyone there the best. It's always sad to hear about this kind of thing. And I agree that, it's a shame when a small studio that is generally much more creative than your big AAA projects kind of gets just, closed down and the air sucked out of the room. So, but it becomes... I know there was a report by Game Industry Biz this week around Sony's investment into the future. And I know I've talked about this on some videos we've done on the channel, but we've talked about this here too, is that if you look at PlayStation's forecast for where they're driving their development funds, right, it's clear what their focus is. And while they're still investing heavily, in fact, even more than they had previously, because they're investing more into their kind of narrative, the experiences we know out of PlayStation, there is a huge focus on going live service. And they're investing heavily into games as a service. So, in fact, the Games Industry Biz article, I believe, called out that it's 60% of their investment is going towards games as a service. So, not really. We've talked about that a little bit. We know they have supposedly about 12 projects that they're shooting for. We don't know what many of those are. We know that Guerrilla is working on an online project. We know that obviously Last of Us Factions is probably the most notable one that we know is coming. But we'll see. Yeah. Well, they've shown art of it.
Yeah. Do you remember that interview where there was just a giant piece of concept art?
Yes.
Great interview.
Yeah. Great. So we'll see. I mean, obviously we should know more about PlayStation here in the coming week because they have a showcase coming up, do they not? I think later this month.
I really doubt you're going to hear about those projects, but the brain drain, I can speak to this as somebody who covers Bungie exclusively. The brain drain at Bungie has begun. People are working on other stuff now.
Is that why we have to pay more for our season passes, Travis?
That is not why you have to pay more for your season passes, but it is part of the reason why Destiny is so broken, in addition to the remote work situation, which I happen to know. Also, this is actually interesting. One of the things that made Destiny less stable, and for those of you who don't know, Destiny is in a really bad place right now as a game. It's just like really buggy and just things are breaking constantly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really bad. And part of the reason for that actually is Stadia's death. It's crazy, but when Stadia came out, Bungie sort of jumped on that bandwagon hardcore, and the reason they did it is because it helped them with QA testing really, really well. Apparently they were using it as an internal QA thing, and so when Stadia died, apparently the wake of Stadia has made QA testing in a remote work environment a lot harder on them, and you can see it. They actually fired their head of QA recently.
If they have that use case, is Google not selling that enterprise? I mean, Google, what are you doing?
I don't think they are. Yeah,
Google doesn't know what they're doing half the time.
Yeah, I think Stadia. I think Google just tries stuff, and they're not so worried about losing or making money at this for certain projects. But yeah, it's a real thing. Yeah, and Bungie fired their QA lead, and they're trying to fix stuff, but it's a real messy situation right now. So.
Wow.
Times happen.
It's funny you say that because my stepson, who I told you is Destiny stan through and through, he used to play on Stadia all the time. Like he would just be sitting there in our house playing on his phone, like playing Destiny. Like, yeah,
that's surprising. Wow.
Yeah. But wow. Okay. We've got a super chat here. Speaking of which, Stadia shoots with the €10 super chat. Current cloud gaming runs on virtual rigs that simulate some high-end PCs. But what about games that are designed to fully utilize cloud hardware and software? When will we start getting those? Well, I would say we're probably a long way out, considering we can't even barely get software that utilizes the on-premise boxes that we buy.
Yeah, this is the crackdown kind of question, right? Which is, I mean, you need kind of mass adoption of high-speed internet solutions, which we don't have even in the United States yet.
Correct.
Yes, I know San Francisco, but we're not all in San Francisco.
Oh no, I wasn't. That wasn't a pretentious I was. It was more of
that wasn't a Travis It was a different type.
No, I wasn't being. What was it? Smug? A smug Travis? Where's my mug, by the way? I was told very explicitly that. I was told that there was going to be a smug Travis mug via that trailer that Chinchilla of Evidence put out. Is that? You guys remember that?
You're right. I do remember that. We forgot the design one. We'll get right on that. That's top priority.
Yeah. So I've been hearing about the death of local hardware for a really long time. Like E3 2016, they were like, "Oh yeah, next year it's happening." I heard at the Snoop Dogg party in 2018. Was it? I think it was.
Sure.
Do you guys remember this? There was a Snoop Dogg party in a parking. It was a car sale thing. It was on the rooftop. Like Keanu Reeves was there. It was like a crazy party. Snoop Dogg was getting his own headphones, and so they had a big party at E3 for it. Anyway, I was at that party. It's LA. Things are crazy there. Anyway, I was there, and I heard engineers who work for a very large game company that I won't name talking about how they were like a year away from creating a way that you could get better performance on a local device or on the cloud than you could on a local device, and just make all these things go. And they were like, it's going to happen. Like all these consoles are going to just be gone, because why would you ever buy a console if you could just take out your phone and connect it to a?
Well, you're literally describing Stadia. That's what it was. I mean, that's what they sold. I mean,
that exactly. But this was supposed to be like the consoles are going to get replaced, and it was. Anyway, it never happened. And it didn't happen in 2016 or 2017. Stadia came out, and I actually think the problems with Stadia are more the model itself. Like you could just see the business model.
About that one CMA paragraph that's like it died because it didn't have Call of Duty. It's like, okay, except that I did a video the day that it was announced talking about how stupid the model was.
The model was bad to all gamers right when it was announced. We were like, there's no way you're going to charge people subscription and they have to buy the game. That was like just their original sin. And so but yeah, I've just been hearing about this for so long. And the more I hear about it, the less I believe it, because I just don't think that day is as near. I had people telling me at the last E3 that maybe will ever happen, like swearing to me, like getting mad at me actually that I didn't believe them, that like this next console generation was going to be the last one and all this other stuff. And I just do not buy it at this point. I think local hardware is always going to have a place. I think it's really hard to beat just having it. And I think as much as people want the internet infrastructure to be better, that is a large global problem that I don't know if you're going to get around unless Elon Musk's satellite internet thing just changes everything, which who knows, it could. I mean,
dude, he can't even get Twitter to work. Calm down.
I mean, but yeah, you could throw that at him, and that's definitely warranted. But also, he does get things done. I mean, he's put rockets in space, and made electric cars a thing. I would say that's I don't like the guy either, but he's done stuff. So unless something like that changes the landscape of internet, I just don't think it's as close as people say it is. Will it happen in our lifetime? Absolutely, for sure. Assuming we don't all die, that might happen. That's like 80% odds. But yeah, I don't believe it.
No, I agree. The only thing I was going to add to that, Travis, but I think you got there in the end, is that the dreamers, the entrepreneurs, the engineers, the people that work on this kind of technology always sound like that, in my view. Like those are my clients. That's what I usually call the James Bond technology folks. And it's always, oh, that didn't quite work. That didn't quite work, until it does. And then it's real quick. So I do think in our lifetime it happens. And I think it's probably sooner rather than later, but the fundamental infrastructural issues are not going to be solved as quickly as potentially the technology solution is. So you're going to have essentially enclaves of San Francisco and various places that are going to have that kind of interaction with video gaming more than places like the middle of Iowa. Sorry, Iowans.
Yeah, that's true. And to be fair, I live in one of the few places where you could pull out your phone and connect an Xbox controller to it and have pretty much lagless play, because I think we're a 5G whatever hotspot. I don't understand it, but I just know that it works. But even so, I don't feel a huge incentive to actually do that. I don't know what it is. But you think I would be like the target market for this, but I just have never found a use case
I'm
for
exactly like you. Like I could do it in certain instances, but I just like, no, it doesn't do it for me.
I think it's incremental. I mean, I think it's, Netflix replacing DVDs. I think it could, but I mean, the problem I have with like things like the CMA report is that I don't think that's actually a different market. It's a different delivery mechanism for the same content. And so I think it's something that can happen in the future. I think Microsoft is undoubtedly investing in it. I think you're right about the redacted reports there. But just because a company is investing in something doesn't mean that it works, or doesn't mean that there's uptake, doesn't mean that it makes a viable solution for people to get that content. So we're still a ways away. But I think it'll happen.
Yeah, it's not a replacement in that sense. Yeah. Shoosh, thank you. And Shoosh follows up with this will close us out nicely, with a €5 super chat saying, Snoop Dogg party. Is this where Dan got his lesbian t-shirt?
I didn't see Dan there, but I also didn't know who Dan was at the time, so he could have been there. There were a bunch of weird.
All right, roll the flashback. I want to see Travis looking directly at Dan and forgetting he exists.
There were a lot of celebrities. It was pretty star-studded. It was also, I don't know. I'm not a big party person or a loud noises or a crowd person or fun, really. All of those don't really
just keep fun away from me, generally.
Yeah, you decide to roll into the Snoop Dogg party then, Travis?
Because I have this problem where I will do anything if I think it could advance my career. Yeah, I love making $1, guys. I don't know how else to put it. I started playing Magic the Gathering because my bosses play Magic the Gathering. I hated on that game for 31 years, and then my bosses were like, "Hey, do you want to come with some IGNers to come play Magic?" And I went, "Sure, yeah, I love Magic. I'll play."
Yeah, I love Magic. It's awesome.
In my neck of the woods, it's playing golf. You're playing Magic. That's funny.
Exactly. Yeah. And then in the nerd industry, the golf of the video game industry is Magic the Gathering. And if you do not play it, you're not in the club. And so I learned Magic the Gathering, a game I detested for my entire life, because I figured it would give me upward mobility. And guess what? It worked like a charm.
Also, big shout out to my brother Mariano Pampa for 5 gifted memberships over on the SG side, and I'm probably 100% sure we're now over 100 memberships if we weren't previously. So that's amazing. Thank you very much, brother. We will. I'll talk to you on Halo later, where we will cry some more tears about how broken that game is right now. So sounds like Destiny. That's why I was surprised when you talked about Destiny, Travis, being broken mess right now. And I'm like, oh, okay. So every game's just a broken mess right now, apparently.
Yep.
So, cool. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up, boys. I think that's going to do it for us. Chat on both streams, you've been amazing today. Amazing to see 530, whatever we hit concurrent, which is fantastic. Fantastic engagement from last week, too. I think we hit, like, between audio listeners and both channels, we hit several thousand views in 1 week, which is amazing. Views and listens, which is
wonderful,
just
Lane.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And, we're cruising over on the SG side in terms of subs. I think we're less than 700, less than 800, something like that, from 20,000 now. So if you haven't subbed over there, please give it a look. We greatly appreciate it. Other than that, if you want to read my review of Redfall, it is out there.
I recommend it. It's funny.
I wrote a lot of words on it because I had a lot to say. But it's out there. I also, more interestingly, honestly, is the interview I did with, I always pronounce his name wrong, Jonique Botems, who is the composer of the soundtrack for Redfall, which is one of the best parts of the game, bar none. He is also composing the soundtrack for Transformers, the new Transformers movie. He was incredibly interesting to speak to, fantastic career journey, and I would suggest you check that out if you enjoy that type of conversation. Other than that, we are now featuring Hoeg's journey over on Season Gaming as well in the Good in Gaming section. And as we already called out, make sure you check out the charity stream from yesterday. It was a lot of fun and very insightful as well.
Please do. We got Ains and Travis over there on that stream. We talk about hangouts and headlines. We do a couple of other things. We have a conversation with my brain surgeon. We do a lot of fun things on that stream. So
I met your D&D friends. That was nice.
You did get to meet my D&D.
Yes,
it was like meeting your parents. It was a big step.
My fellow lawyers that I dragged into Dungeons and Dragons. Yes.
Yes.
But Lawyers and Dragons is coming back on May 27th, folks. So that'll be pretty fun. That'll be exciting. And you can check out that stream because chat goes nuts for Travis because they want Travis to come on Dungeons and Dragons. So you got to encourage him.
Yeah. Make me a villain. I'll hate you guys. It'll be great.
I don't know. I have to talk to my game master and see exactly where we could work you in, Travis. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I can't be a lawyer. We all know that because I don't respect authority. Oh, Hoeg, you know what I've been wanting to talk to you about? I actually have a lawyer friend who's an anarchist lawyer. Is this common?
I think lawyers come from all different politics and civics backgrounds. So it's not common. Generally speaking, when you go to pursue a career in law, you have some level of respect for the ambits and pillars of the legal system, but I wouldn't say it's uncommon either because it really is everybody.
She's one of those anarchists who believe, you have to take it down from the inside. Yeah. So, well, she's a very interesting character.
I know some anarchists that believe that anarchy would be a better solution for governance, but not that there's any active role that they should take in helping facilitate that. So, I mean, like it's...
Yeah. It sounds like she's working toward it, though. I'm not familiar with her work, but that's the vibe I got from her.
I just assumed California was an open anarchy at all times. Is that not right?
That's not right at all. It's pretty much the opposite. It's much closer to a fascist state. Well, not really, but yeah, you get it. And also, she lives in Seattle. So
I see.
There you go. By the way, shout out to our brother Yago. He says, you guys deserve the love. Ains, Hoeg, Travis, one of the best damn gaming podcasts on YouTube and always a must listen. Thank you.
And Dan.
Appreciate it. And Dan. Yeah, he's not here this week.
On occasion. Yeah.
He's actually listened to us since the beginning. So, yeah, he's definitely been with us on this journey.
I'm sad Dan wasn't here to talk about frame rate on Redfall, another game he hasn't played. Yeah, so good times. What do I got going on this month?
What you got?
I've got a review this week. I'm reviewing the Outlast Trials, the VR Outlast game. Yeah,
I was in a developer preview. Oh, can I say that? No. Yes, I can. I was in a developer preview of that.
You tell me.
But I can't publish content on it.
Checks the embargo, but he's checking.
I know. I was like, oh shit.
Now.
Yeah.
I have 2 games lined up before Diablo, and I thought both of them were going to be canceled because we were getting Diablo codes sooner than we thought. But it sounds like I'm going to be able to squeeze this one in. before Diablo, and then I'll be off to the races
Outlast or
with
something
that.
else?
Outlast. The
Oh,
other
let's
thing
play-
is
let's
gonna
play that together
be
then.
someone else. We can play it together. Oh yeah, it is multiplayer, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
I've not played it yet. I know nothing about it. I like to surprise myself, you know? It's like, what am I going to review this time? We have no idea. But I have played the other Outlast games. They're very disgusting.
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, I'm doing that. And you can see all my stuff on IGN and on my Twitter if you want to follow me at TyGuyTravis. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
Don't ever say that on This Season Gaming channel again. Thank you.
And for everything else,
Count the days
stick with
for
Season Gaming.
That's better. Hoeg, anything else you'd like to call out before we get out?
No, I mean, the fundraiser that we did yesterday was the conclusion of my series on my stroke. So I did 8 videos. We did interviews with my therapists. We talked to my brain surgeon. We have a whole bunch of stuff about my experiences doing this whole thing. I'm very proud of that series. It's very different than anything I've ever done. It's much more personal than I'm even comfortable with being online. So if you like to see me mildly uncomfortable in certain instances, please watch that series. It's a good one. I'm very happy that it's out there. I think it's hopefully going to help some people that are in similar situations, which I really don't want anybody to have to be in, but that's just the way of the world. So check that out. Tell people about it. That's what I would say is what I've been working on for a number of weeks and has been in my head for a number of months. It actually was quite the moment to finish the fundraiser stream yesterday and be like, wow, that project is over because I had devoted so much time and attention to it that it was really kind of weird. But please do check it out because I'm really proud of it. And I hope that it helps if you need that help with that kind of information from my story.
It's a playlist to be proud of, Hoeg. Excited for you. And for those who are wondering, Hoeg being mildly uncomfortable is my ASMR.
And what a perfect way to end the episode. Thank you all, as always, all of you who engage with us. Super appreciative, as I always say. Audio listeners as well. Shout out to you. And thank you, everyone. Make sure to check out both channels. Give us the likes, the love across the board. Super appreciative. And we will be back next week, as always, where I'm sure we can talk about something else. What's next week? We got Zelda next week and Diablo's Server Slam.
Just a small May 12th.
I can't wait to fight Ains. I'm going to show up at Ains' house and punch him in the face. That's going to be next episode.
Tears of the Kingdom is going to be awesome, folks. Don't listen to
Tears of the Kingdom because
I'm probably not playing it at launch.
Yeah, we're going to fight about it though.
I'm not going to fight about it.
You're
going to have opinions about it. You haven't played it. You're just like Dan.
No, stop it. I'm the antithesis of that. Next week will be fun already. Everyone have a good week. Enjoy your gaming. We will see you then. Peace.
Bye.